Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Season 38 of the Gran Touring Series Racing League, known in short as GTSRL. I'm your host, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and we are going to be back tonight with some absolutely fantastic racing. It's been a couple of weeks since Season 37 concluded and the dust settled, but we've got another load of frantic action ahead, and what a better place to be for it than at the Nürburgring GP circuit, kicking off the season with EU Division 1. Now I know what you're probably wondering, why are we so excited for this season? What's new this season? What's it all about? Well, as you can probably hear in the background, the rumble of a V12 engine, a 6-litre V12. That's the sound of a good number of Aston Martin DBR9 GT1s from 2010, the Le Mans car. We are looking out on GT Sport a Group 3 or GT3 class season where it's all based on balance of performance, but unlike the previous seasons, which we've seen over the last couple of months, where there's been no tuning permitted, tonight tuning is allowed. So as a result, it's not just about being the master of the car you choose within Group 3 or the GT3 category within GT Sport, but it's also about being able to master the tune you use on the car and getting the most out of the vehicle at each given circuit. So without further ado then, let's go down to trackside and start to introduce our drivers one by one at this very technical and tricky German circuit. Now, it being EU Division 1, it's going to be the case that some of the drivers you're going to see today will be well known among the GTSRL community, but there's also going to be some drivers here who you may not have seen before. It's been a real shake-up going into Season 38, and indeed some would argue in fact that we've got quite a few newcomers or new faces here, and well, we're all the merrier for it, and that it's really mixed up the order. What the fact we're going to have 3 EU divisions each week. That's right, Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday we're going to be having live action for you. But moving away from talking about the other divisions and just sticking with one division in particular, we say hello to all of you tuning in chat and hope you're doing well today, such as Zeronic. And if you are watching right now, folks, be sure to say hi and let me know how you're doing, whether it be Monday and it's the first day of the week, and I hope you've all had a good working week. But enough banter, let's start to move on to our drivers then and introduce them one by one. We start off with one driver who is very familiar to everyone when we find him out on circuit, and that is Olaf, or Olaf Biscuit in full, running around tonight in the Aston Martin DBR9 GT1 with the Renault-inspired livery there, based on the livery which I believe was used by Renault when Fernando Alonso won his 2 championships with Renault in the mid part of the noughties, back when he was in competition with Michael Schumacher, before Michael Schumacher, racing Ferrari at that time, retired from Formula 1. He did his first retirement and then returned for Mercedes a few years later. Now, Olaf, of course, is well known, a very fast driver, one of the fastest drivers we have seen in any season where he's been part of the GTSRL races, always within EU Division 1, and he has typically been dominant. He has been the guy to beat, and if he hasn't been squandered at the start of the race, he's normally gone off into the distance and left everyone behind, or at least had people trailing him, but they've never been able to quite match him for pace. And we get the feeling down at the paddock that Olaf is on form tonight and fiery once again. Now, he is just one of multiple drivers here, of course. He forms one part of team number 1, and he is joined by a Mamba, who we're going to be finding around on circuit very shortly. As we look around the field, and here is one Mamba Strike 1000, or Mamba in short, also running in the Aston Martin DBR9 with matching liveries with Olaf. Great to see the team set up there for team number 1, these two drivers together. And Mamba is a newcomer to the GTSRL community from what I gather, and we have not seen him before, so he's a bit of an unknown entity. But the thing is, for him to be in EU Division 1, he's got to have put in a phenomenal performance in the time trial session. And let's put this out there, folks, time trial was all about running Ferrari 458 Italia GT3s around Suzuka. Balance of performance was on, but no tuning was permitted. So as a result, all of our drivers had equal machinery and had to show their pace, whereas tonight they go one step further and not only have to show their pace, but also show their tuning credentials. Because if they're not good at tuning, then they may feel as though they're being a little bit left behind by comparison with those who can get the most out of the vehicle. But those are our 2 drivers who make up team number 1. Now we move on to team number 2, and 2 familiar faces. Well, definitely familiar to me, and to most of you I reckon they'll be quite familiar. Now, one of them in particular, having a cracking time, currently sat in the pits, bringing the Corvette C7 from the United Kingdom. Kraken featured and debuted in the previous season, in season 37, and did very well in all the races he participated in, and really was one of the heroes of season 37 and somebody who is a rising star in the GTSRL community, and we look forward to seeing what he can achieve tonight. He is joined by Ben MK. Now, Ben running around on circuit at the moment in his own Aston Martin DBR9. Ben being a very fast driver as well, and one of those drivers who we have regularly seen within EU Division 1, or at least on the fringes of EU Division 1 if he hasn't been there. Although every time I've commentated, I believe Ben has been there, and he's been putting in phenomenal performances and really trying to push upwards towards the podium and getting on the podium within EU Division 1. Now we take a walk away from Ben. We wish Team 2 all the best of luck, of course, and we head over to Zeng Q, who is our lead driver for team number 3. Now the Polish driver needs no introduction. Most people within the GTSRL community will know Zeng Q. I do indeed. I've raced alongside him. A very ferocious and fast driver. Perhaps not always having luck on his side, and sometimes it's been a little bit rough around the edges. But Zeng Q is one of those drivers who you have to fear out on circuit for the simple reason, if he sees a gap, he's going to go for it. And speaking of a gap, he's going to try and make a pass on Alex Line in the practice session right now. Keeping in mind we have still got 24 minutes before we get underway of qualifying, and Alex already flashing his lights as if to say to Zeng Q, okay mate, settle it down a little bit, I've given you the space, haven't I? But Zeng Q being one of 2 drivers for team number 3, and we're expecting great things from Zeng Q. Whenever it's a Group 3 season, he does very well typically, or really throws the hammer and tongs at everything to try and get a solid result. Although he's competing quite a bit of Alex at the moment, I think these two have also had connectivity issues with one another, and perhaps racing around together on circuit this close is to test to make sure they can both race comfortably side by side. Now Zeng Q is joined by our trackside steward today, and also racing today, and that is GTSRL's own XE, or Executable in full, but we'll be referring to him as XE from this point onwards. The Polish driver as well, so the 2 Poles racing together, bringing his Aston Martin DBR9 tonight. Now, we haven't seen XE race for some time within the GT Sport seasons of GTSRL, so we'll be interested to see what he's able to achieve. But from what I gathered down at the paddock, XE is well known and a fast driver, and he's been away for a little while, but he's come back as a season 38, and we'll be looking forward to see what he can do today and whether he can execute some great results along with his namesake. Their team number 3, the Polish team, and team number 4 coming up is a combination of Crowhawk, who we're going to find around on the circuit, the Croatian here. Crowhawk being a driver who we've seen recently arrive on the GTSRL scene and gradually gaining a reputation for being relatively fast and quite consistent as well. Crowhawk looking forward to tonight and bringing his own Aston Martin DBR9. And he is joined by Slim, or in full Slim users, and we will find Slim out on circuit. The Finnish driver also running around in the like-for-like livery DBR9 from Aston Martin there. A lot of DBR9s, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second why that is the case, folks. But Slim users here making his way out of the Mercedes arena down towards turn 6, if I remember correctly. And, well, we'll be looking to see what the Finn is capable of over the course of tonight's racing. With him being a relatively new racer within the latest seasons, and definitely a new face, at least from my perspective. Now, to make our way away from team number 4 and move on to team number 5, we do have a pair of drivers, one of whom we have recently seen as part of some other racing championships that we have commentated on, and that is TNR's Philo, who I believe is still making his way down towards the circuit. TNR Philo being, of course, one of the Alien League drivers within the Next Gen Racing Community's BMW M4 Faster Series, which we commentate on Sundays. And Philo, a very fast driver, and there is a lot of hype and expectations surrounding Philo down at the paddock due to his reputation of being very fast in other championships. But whilst Philo's not here, we're still waiting for him to make his way down to the paddock and then onto circuit. He will be the lead driver of Team 5, and he will be joined by a driver who I think personally doesn't really need an introduction, and that is Phil the Vibes in the United Kingdom. The British driver having put in stellar performances within the previous seasons. If I remember correctly, a combination of EU Division 2 and EU Division 1 over the course of the last couple of seasons, and now he's on the premier time in EU Division 1 in a GT3 season, i.e. season 38, and this is a great opportunity for Phil the Vibes to really showcase what he's made of over the course of the 3 weeks of racing. And indeed, he is one of those drivers that essentially he is one of those drivers who is growing more and more and really getting to the mould as we go, and further he's moving up the field. Moving away from Phil the Vibes, of course, we then have to talk a little bit about Ukrainian Guy, or Yaya as we refer to him in short. Now, Ukrainian Guy is one of those drivers, or Yaya as I should refer to him, out on circuit in the Aston Martin DBR9. He's one of those drivers, again, a very fast, a very ferocious driver, and always picking up very strong results in EU Division 1, and tonight should be no exception for Yaya. The pressure will be on, and the expectations will be on him to do very well. We are looking forward to seeing what the British driver is able to achieve. And he is joined as part of team number 6 by the Welshman of Luco 33. Now Luco, of course, the big question around Luco is, given that he's appeared towards the midfield of any season he's competed in over the last couple of seasons, where is he going to find himself tonight, as we find the Welsh driver currently parked up just outside of turn 1 and returning to the paddock. Now he's bringing something different to the table. He is bringing the 2016 Mercedes AMG GT3, and that's going to be a very different car from the majority of cars here, what of them being Aston Martins typically, as Luco has just walked out the paddock briefly, probably just to go for a toilet break and a comfort break before coming back and getting back out on circuit. Those are our drivers for Team 6, and then last but not least of our drivers, we have the newcomer of Alex Lyon, the Italian here, currently parked in the pits bringing the Hyundai Genesis, a very different car from the majority here, a very different style of front engine rear-wheel drive machinery, and it'll be interesting to see what Alex is able to achieve, given he is an unknown in this season. We haven't seen anything of Alex over the last couple of seasons. He's only recently joined GTSRL, and we wish him all the best on his debut tonight. And he is the lead driver of Team 7, and he is joined by Lawrence 321, another newcomer to the series as well, and indeed for this season. And Lawrence making his way out on circuit at the moment in the Mercedes AMG GT3, the driver from the United Kingdom, and we will be looking to see what Team 7 can do. Two very new faces on the block, and two very fast drivers based on their time trial results. So those are our 14 drivers introduced. Of course, we have got a couple of drivers who are not on circuit at the moment, but we've introduced them nonetheless, and we hope to see them shortly down at the paddock and eventually out onto the circuit. But that's how it stands, and we are now waiting for clarification from our race director whether we're going to be getting underway with start checks anytime soon. Currently our drivers are being asked to do their voice comm checks. They can hear our race side steward, which of course is XE, who's currently sat in the, well, he's actually driving around on the circuit at the moment and tuning in with all the drivers to make sure that everything is set up so that way we can have good, fair, clean and fun racing. Now, whilst we've still got approximately 18 minutes to go and we've introduced our drivers, let's talk a little bit about the circuit. And indeed, let's ride on board with, well, I was going to say with Lawrence, but he's going to have to shed a penalty. We're going to find one of our drivers who's coming towards the end of the lap. In fact, we are going to ride with Phil the Vibes, or we're not, because he's decided to do a little bit of rallycross. If one of you guys could politely keep it on the circuits, that way we can do a toured lap. Indeed, we will switch on board with Ben MK. So, coming out the final corner, turn 16, and here we go. Ben is going to be charging down towards turn 1 as he makes his way down here, shifting up through the gears, going up in towards 6th gear here, opening up into the overdrive gear, and now he's going to be braking heavily at approximately 100 metres into turn 1, a very tight hairpin, 2nd gear, perhaps even jumping down the 1st gear to get the car to rotate in, and now into the Mercedes arena. 4 corners, starting off with turn 2, the left-hander here, we have to be patient on the throttle, and you can afford to run wide out onto the exit curb here for turn number 3, snapping on the brakes, clutching at the brakes here, and avoiding going too deep into turn 3, before now snapping it round to the right for turn number 4 to complete the Mercedes arena complex. And now he's going to use the full runoff area essentially to accelerate out, build as much momentum as possible, now up towards turn number 5. Now turn 5, braking just after the tour off road there for the shorter version of the circuit, before going into turn 6, a flowing sequence there, and now as he makes his way down towards the hairpin at turn number 7, it's full throttle all the way down here, and this hairpin, it's one that's likened to have 2 apexes rather than 1, but you have to think about it as if it's a singular massive apex, some drivers say, whilst others will say it is just 2 apexes, treat it as 2 mini corners in 1. But nicely done there by Ben in 2nd gear, and now charging up the hill towards the Schumacher S, whereby we've got turns 8 and 9 coming at quick fire at you, and as he makes his way up through 8 and 9 and charging up towards 10, flat out for 8 and 9 as would be expected with a degree of tuning. Now coming up towards turn number 10, snapping on the brakes at 100 metres from the corner, and now running it out in towards turn 11. The corner that's very tricky because there's no real marker to tell you when you want to turn in or lift off the throttle or brake in, but now set nicely there, Ben, and now charging down for the final few corners, going down towards 12 before the chicane at 13 and 14. I think we've missed the corner number because there should be 16 corners, but we've only said 15 in total. As he comes down towards 13 and 14 in, breaking it all the way down, snapping down to 2nd on entry and getting a little bit sideways there, running over the opening apex curve of the chicane. Bit of a disaster there for Ben, and he'll need to be wary of that. Looking quite an unstable setup there with that Aston Martin, but still, nonetheless, almost a fully completed lap, and you can get a feel for what we're looking to achieve here. Now, as we take a look over towards our live messaging board here from you, the viewer, let's have a little chat and see what's going on. And we say hello to Zoronic, Robert DeMacuro, as we always do, to Ben Jeet, who has subscribed. Thank you for subscribing, Ben. And indeed, that is some very good stonks there. You have invested well with your stonks. We've also got in the chat Pingo Phone, who we say hello to, the awesome Pingo Phone, who's done a very good job in season 37, and we look forward to seeing Pingo Phone later on within this season. I believe Pingo is in EU Division. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Pingo. It is EU Division 2. You're part of team number 5, and that we'll see more of you tomorrow out on circuit. And we've also got, well, I don't think we've got anybody else in the chat. Well, we've also got Jerry, race car driver as well, Jerry R driver, who is a regular familiar who races around on the circuit as well. And hopefully, folks, the stream is going through well. We have upgraded to 1080p 30 frames per second tonight, so hopefully it's coming through all fine and dandy and the quality's a little bit improved. Be sure to let me know, give me some feedback over the course of tonight's proceedings, so that way if we do need to fine tune it or drop it back down to 720p 60 fps, we can do so for tomorrow night's stream, or if it's an emergency, we'll do it tonight. But all of our drivers right now are getting themselves set up, as we also say hello to Yugi, or Jugi0809, who I believe is racing tonight, and I believe Yugi is the name also for Crowhawk, our Croatian driver, who has just returned to the pits. And as we go around the circuit, all of our drivers really now making their way around and going for as fast a lap as possible and just trying to get that final practice in. We do have that time before the start checks, of course, which they'll use to their utmost as Olaf comes into the pits. And of course, our drivers will be keeping in mind the extended pit time loss here, which I believe for the Nürburgring GP circuit, based on the way the 24-hour circuit is configured, you are looking at approximately a 20-second time loss just for a tyre change within the pits here. Although don't quote me on that, because I haven't tested it at the GP circuit myself as of yet. But Alex right now, Alex Line, the Italian, who we're just following from third person, making his way down towards the hairpin here and getting it very nice on the brakes, and that's very, very different with regards to the Hyundai. The Aston Martin DBR9 is seen as the tuner's car within Group 3 for the simple reason it is effectively a GT1 car, or a Group 1 car that has been down-tuned for the classification of Group 3 in Gran Turismo Sport, but it should normally be racing at a much higher category, and by using tuning you can essentially unlock all the down tuning and revert the car more towards its typical racing spec. Whereas other cars that will be featured, such as the Corvette C7, are very strong within the Group 3 category by default, or the Mercedes AMG 2016 GT3, but this Hyundai here is really the car which has made me raise an eyebrow, and indeed some other individuals may be raising eyebrows right now, because it is a very stable car and very strong on the brakes, but also with the standard balance of performance, this is one of the fastest accelerating front engine rear-wheel drive cars within Group 3 up to 5th gear. As soon as you get to 5th and 6th gear, it starts to hit a brick wall, but of course with some tuning, you can remove that brick wall in terms of the acceleration as conferred by PD's balance of performance. So that's the story with regards to that Hyundai there, and we are just waiting for some of the drivers as we're going to be getting our first start check underway. I'm very sorry to hear, Robert, that you are getting a little bit of stuttering there, as we say hello to Avilex Sparks and also to Zefix's Dark Drek. Hope you're both doing very well and that you're having a good day. And as we get underway with our first start check, what's the purpose of this, you may be asking if you're new here? This is to make sure that all of our drivers are able to get off the grid, because sometimes we do have some connectivity issues, and as a result drivers get stuck, they have to start resetting their routers and return to the circuit in due course. And this is also a good feel for our drivers to get that last minute practice of what the race start is like, as we see one driver try and jump the start in the rear of your camera shot on the left hand side there, but that didn't work out for them, as we immediately get underway then with the first start check, making our way down towards turn number 1. Everybody charging down towards, and we can see that Alex Line, they're getting a very, very nice launch off of his starting position, as having the Kraken time was the one who moved at the start and his game has crashed. So he is going to have to restart, and we will be back underway in due course with Kraken time, hopefully, as we see some drivers, well, a number of drivers have to leave, in fact. So we have got quite a few connectivity issues here with the lobby, and all the lobby is starting to go a little bit sideways, because that is the best part of 6 drivers who have had to quit. So that is not good. But we will try and get that fixed, of course, as all of our drivers make it up towards turns 5 and 6, and then they'll probably leave the race and return to the basics. Indeed, we have got a lot of drivers disconnecting from the lobby, so I get the feeling that there may be some major lobby issues. As we are just waiting to find out, and we're seeing a similar thing to what happened, unfortunately, in our commentating last night for NXGN. Goodness me, GT Sport. Ah, well, If it's not broken, then probably don't fix it. And we also say hello to Vitor Knight 21 in the chat. And I believe there has been a little bit of confusion as well, folks, with regards to how the stock check's meant to be run. The new principle is that... Pardon me? What I'm trying to say is that the stock check process that used to exist was that we would essentially have all of our drivers pull off, go about a third of the way down the circuit, do the first couple of corners, and then they quit the race. Whereas it seems recent updates to GT Sport have made lobbies more temperamental in terms of the races, and instead our drivers are going to be asked to complete a one-lap race to make sure that they're not getting stuck on the grid. Because when people quit out of the race, when it crashes, what seems to happen instead is that it causes the entire lobby to start bugging out and everybody starts to disconnect in rapid fashion. So we're going to try and get that fixed as a result. But you are right, Mr. Sparks, GT Sport is a little bit sensitive, as we're seeing some drivers pop in and out. At least the yellow flag issue was fixed, however, so they managed to fix one thing. It's a movement in the right direction. We just wish, of course, that they would fix more than one thing when they release a major update. And unfortunately, I'm not permitted to repeat what some of the messages that are going between our drivers down at the paddock right now, because I think it's a bit sensitive and some of our younger viewers may get offended by some of the language that's being used. But let's just say everybody's really happy that the one issue that has been fixed is the yellow flag issue and not some of the lobby issues. You can probably tell I'm being a bit sarcastic there, but dearie me. Everybody is now rejoining. We are going to hop the camera back out on circuit now that we've got a couple of drivers out there. And you're probably wondering as well, why are a good number of drivers from different teams running rather similar liveries? Well, we do have a significant number of drivers in EU Division 1, such as Slim Yeezus here, who race as part of the COC racing team. And as a result of that, because they're all part of one team, they're running slightly differentiated liveries, but they're primarily the same to represent the fact they run as part of a wider team. But, of course, we'll be able to differentiate the drivers for you thanks to the wonderful technology and the data we have on screen. And it's good to hear, Robert, that things are getting fixed. Now, for those wondering, when are we going to get underway with qualifying? We are planning to get underway with qualifying at 8 o'clock British Summer Time this evening, so in approximately 8 minutes. But I get the feeling that we may be delayed by approximately 2 to 3 minutes, as we will need to get at least 2 stock checks underway. That's typically the norm. We'll do 2 stock checks to make sure that everything is fine, and where essentially you want to repeat your test at least once to make sure the result is the same. If you end up getting something different, of course, then it can be a little bit of a nightmare. So bear with us, folks. Bit of patience, but we will get there in the end. Now, we talked a little bit about the Aston Martin DBR9. Let's talk about, well, we talked about the Hyundai as well, but there is one car that we do need to do a little bit of talking about when it's finally out on the circuit, and that is, if we remember correctly, the Corvette being run by Having a Cracking Time. Now, this is the Corvette C7. Its reputation within Group 3 is that this is a car which has a huge amount of torque. If I remember correctly, it has the strongest torque of any Group 3 car, according to the Balance Performance set by Polyphony Digital, within the Group 3 category. What does that mean? Why is that important? Well, what that means is effectively you here have got a very strong car in terms of its outright acceleration pace, and it can deploy that power very effectively. The flip side of the conundrum is, of course, with all that power, how do you tune the car to get the most out of it? Because it'll be strong in the acceleration and getting up into those top gears. Well, that's something that our drivers will have to figure out, of course, in terms of their gearing. And also, other things to keep in mind with regards to the Corvette C7 is that because of its natural aspiration, its NA aspiration, as a result, the car does not need to rely on a turbo in order to be able to get its performance. So whereas some other cars racing around circuits, such as the Hyundai, for example, I believe the Hyundai is the case, although I may be wrong here, don't quote me on this immediately, may have a turbo which they've got to try and work around, because when they're outside of the turbo band the car loses performance. The Corvette can deliver a very meaty punch for its engine all the way out through the RPM range. That is the same, it could be argued, of the Aston Martin 6-litre V12 engine. Again, very strong engine. It doesn't require anything to supplement it in order to give it its power. Whereas if we switch over to the Hyundai here, which again, this is actually a naturally aspirated engine, I should clarify, I didn't think it was a turbo, but there we go. It's not a turbo, and as a result, this engine will be punching quite hard. As I said earlier, the Hyundai's engine is made more for the initial acceleration rather than that top end speed. So that's something that Alex has had to really think about here. And I think we can see it already in the fact that he's up into 6th gear at 148 miles an hour going down the start finish straight into turn 1, but very solid on the brakes. And that's, I think, the thing that Alex has tuned his car for in particular, is that idea of being able to get up to a higher speed quicker than most people and then being ready to go on the brakes, very deep on the brakes, into corners, the heavy braking zones, which dominate the Nürburgring GP circuit, because that way he's able to go highly defensive or he can go very aggressive into corners. And we see Slim users here just waiting up towards turn number 5 as everybody comes through, and everybody's being very patient right now and waiting to go. And we do have Yaya at the moment, who is currently restarting his entire PlayStation, so that is why we are waiting, and it's a little bit idle at this point in time. Now, if you haven't already, of course, be sure to go grab yourself a glass of water or some snacks or a cup of tea or an alcoholic beverage if you feel you need one this early on in the week. As Yaya rejoins, we are going to be getting underway with our start check within the next couple of minutes, and then we should be underway with qualifying a few minutes after that. I've got a glass of water beside me. I'm probably going to need to get a refresher sometime during the night because of the amount of racing that's going to be happening. And for those who are new to GTSRL, what can you expect on the calendar tonight? Well, we have 10 minutes of 12 minutes of qualifying, which will kick off as an open lobby style effectively, where all of our drivers will go out onto the circuit with full fuel and also tyre wear modelled on as well. And that way they can either just keep putting in the laps and do them on higher levels of fuel, or what we typically see from other drivers such as Yaya, is that they will essentially burn the fuel for the first few minutes and then put in some flying laps towards the end. Once we've done that open qualifying session, we then get underway with race number 1, which will be a 10-minute race. It's 5 laps in total, effectively the equivalent of a 10-minute race. And at the end of that, everybody's positions will be tallied. And then the grid for race 2 will be another 10-minute race, which starts in the grid order of the finishing order of race number 1. So the driver who finishes first in race number 1 starts on pole for race number 2. And then after race number 2, we have a small break before we get underway with race number 3, a 20-minute race consisting of 10 laps, a mandatory pit stop, and again, the grid order is set by the finishing positions of race 2, where if you win race 2, you start on pole for race 3. And here is stock check number 2 coming right at you now. And this again will be a good time for our drivers to get information on one another, because of course everybody's tuning their car differently or put some slight adjustments in, although because we've got a lot of Aston Martin DB09s, we could be seeing very similar tunes for a good number of drivers. But in particular, our drivers will be keeping their eyes on Luco and Alex, who are starting at the front of the start check, to see just how strong their acceleration off the line is, and also the reaction time of these two drivers as start check number 2 commences now. So there we go, lights out, and away we go for this start check. And everybody this time was able to get off the line. Minus one driver, we saw that, and I think that was ZenQ Meister, who couldn't get off the grid. So ZenQ immediately having to get off, but everybody seems to be able to get away minus ZenQ. So this is a little bit of a disaster for the Polish driver, who is having some technical difficulties right now. But everybody's going to do this one lap as they make their way around the circuit. And again, we can see here as well how everyone's trying to keep it relatively clean through the Mercedes arena, albeit their Kraken time getting forced out a little bit wide at turn 4. I think he also got a little bit of oversteer there from cold tyres and trying to get on the throttle very early. But as they all make their way now down towards the second sector of the circuit and through, as ZenQ Meister resets in order to try and get the issue fixed, we can see that Ben MK is our leader in this one lap start check race. And Luco and the Mercedes right now doing a relatively good job of holding on to P2 as Crowhawk goes for a move onto Alex line there, sizing up the Italian. I think Crowhawk will be trying to use that to try and disturb the Italian a little bit there and try to get a feel for what Alex is going to drive like when he's under pressure. And again, that's what a lot of our newcomers here will be to some of the more veteran drivers in GTSRL. They'll be essentially tested by some of the veterans in these start checks as though, so what are you going to do when I put a bit of pressure on you? What if I go for that last minute move? Will you react to it? Will you notice it? Will you be aware of it? And sizing one another up early on can really be beneficial when we get into the proper racing tonight. As we see TNR's Philo, a driver driver who we should have introduced earlier, but until he arrived, of course, we couldn't introduce him. Racing tonight, and he is a newcomer to GTSRL and making his debut tonight. We wish Philo all the best as he goes to the move on Feel the Vibes up into the chicane here at turn 14. A very nice move, a classical move into 14, as we see one driver get forced out very wide there going out of that chicane, and that was, I believe, Yaya being knocked a little bit wide as they all come towards the end of the start check race, and that is Ben MK who has won it ahead of Crowhawk and Luco rounding off the podium. Alex Lyon and TNR Philo completing our top 5 in the start check race. But of course, there's no points for this one. It's just a simple case that all of our drivers just needed to make it round. And I've just had it clarified to me, folks, that Philo is not a newcomer to the GTSRL community. He is an old hand in GTSRL. My apologies. Thank you for clarifying that, Benjeet. Well, we'll keep that in our notepad from this point onwards. As we say hello to MDC3755 in the chat as well. Sounds like you're having a bit of a rest tonight, MDC. Not racing tonight? Or hosting this season? As we also say hello to Gomez1988, the Portuguese driver who we saw a lot of in seasons 37 and 36. Now, what's going on right now, folks? You're probably wondering, well, we've had Alex Lyon have to restart because unfortunately there does seem to be some sort of issue between himself and ZenQ where neither driver can see one another. I believe we are doing a start check now, a start check race where ZenQ is present but not Alex Lyon, to see whether ZenQ is able to pull off the line or gets any connectivity issues here. Because if ZenQ is not able to pull off for this one, it would be suggestive that it might be a wider problem than just simply Alex Lyon being in the same lobby with him. So we're going to get underway then with another start check race here. It's going to be just one lap. We do have a little bit of a run over now. And again, as this time they all get underway. Looks as though everybody's had a sweet start here. Nobody's had any issues getting off the grid. And as a result of that, I think we're starting to get our issues resolved here, as they all make their way down towards turn 1, and again relatively clean through, although the full width of the track is being used as Feel the Vibes goes a little bit sideways there going into turn 1. And we're just going to take a quick look back, give you a feel for what it's like at the start of the race, riding on board with Feel the Vibes here as he makes his way down towards turn number 1. And you're going to see he's going to have drivers come up his inside like no tomorrow, and he tries to close the door a little bit but does end up going a bit wide here. As he gets on the power, he's going to feel the rear wheels spin up very heavily, and that's why you saw him get that snap oversteer, which he fortunately corrected. As we now jump back on board with Feel the Vibes as he makes his way into turn number 6 for the first time of asking, and the only time of asking in this start check race. And what a lovely sound from that engine as he's making his way down towards turn number 7. Well, sorry, turn number 8 in this case. Turn number 7 being the predominant left-hander before that. And as all of our drivers make their way through, we can see that whilst we do have a majority of Aston Martins, it's not as though our Mercedes or our Corvettes are being left behind, or indeed the little Hyundai. Although the Hyundai at this point is not racing this one, and that is Alex, who is currently restarting things right now. As Luco, it's feeling a bit of pressure from Crowhawk here as they both go into the left-hander before the extended right-hander in the run down towards the chicane, and Luco going very nicely on the defence there. The Welshman showing Crowhawk that it's not going to be easy to overtake him in the race as they go for the cutback here. Does Crowhawk up towards the chicane and coming up in towards turn 14. You can see that he's got the momentum up the hill here, and instead Luco tucks him behind and decides, you know what, it's not worth trying to recontest it into the chicane. He hasn't got the momentum to do so. He'd have to force a door that's not open to him, as Kraken is up into P4, and they all come around the final corner once again to complete this second start check. As they come across the line then, it'll be Ben MK who takes the win in this one ahead of Crowhawk and Luco33 and Kraken Time, and Feel the Vibes rounding off our top 5. And Lawrence is just going to complete the order here, having gone off a little somewhere on circuit and picked up a half-second penalty in the process, but it's not to worry. Okay, folks, so what I'm hearing in my ear right now, or I'm reading on screen, is that what's effectively going to happen is there will be one more check in a short period. We are 5 minutes behind schedule right now, but we are starting to catch up on ourselves here. We are waiting for Alex to rejoin the lobby. Once we do have him back in the lobby, a decision is going to be taken on whether we run qualifying immediately, or alternatively, whether we get underway with another start check to see what happens when Alex and ZenQ are back in the same lobby once again. But that seems to be the issue, where the two just simply can't get along. Their two internet connections are not compatible. Italy doesn't want to get along with Poland in this instance, and neither does Poland with Italy. We're currently patiently waiting, and of course, really, at this point, there's nothing much else to add other than it is just a countdown right now to when we finally get things underway, as we are hearing that Alex is now having some issues in seeing the actual race lobby, so this is not looking good. As we say hello to Diffuse Gold in the chat. No Porsches this time round, good sir, but that's normally the way it sort of goes within the divisions over the course of these tuning Group 3 seasons. We normally see EU Division 1 is made up of predominantly Aston Martin DBR9s, so you might get one or two different cars. You normally will see a Corvette C7 within there, but we do have some Mercedes here as well today, and we've also got a Hyundai. It's EU Division 2 and EU Division 3 where we see a lot more car variety. I mean, a number of drivers in EU Division 2 and EU Division 3 will be watching tonight's races and noting what the DBR9 was capable of and what other cars were capable of. But at the same time, don't count out the fact that later on this week we may see a lot more car variety. The DBR9 is very strong as a car for this type of season, but it's perhaps not the ultimate car given the circuit. Of course, our drivers are not locked in to taking the cars they bring today to the two races over the subsequent weeks. Or the two rounds over the subsequent weeks, I should say. And the fact that we've got two other circuits, which I won't be naming right now because we're purely at Nürburgring tonight. But things can get mixed up, so I don't expect that we're necessarily going to be seeing Aston Martins all the way or the exact same cars all the way through the season in EU Division 1. But it's EU Divisions 2 and 3 where we're going to see that greater car variety if we had to put a number on it. We follow the fin of Slim Jesus around the circuit right now, making his way up through the Schumacher S. And having a very smooth run on this lap is Mr. Jesus. And I'm hearing word that we are essentially in the situation where we're going to have to go ahead with qualifying. It seems as though Alex Lyon is not able to get back into the lobby right now. There does seem to be some sort of conflict between ZenQ and Alex's connections. And, well, this is very unfortunate. So So qualifying should potentially be occurring within the next minute or so. We'll get a time of day reset, and then we'll be told that qualifying is go, 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 and everybody's got 12 minutes, and we'll see who's on pole by the end of it. You can see right now that Slim is on a flyer, personal best in Sector 1, indeed the fastest man in Sector 1 out of everybody doing the practice laps right now, as he goes a bit wide through what is turn number 7 on the base circuit map. And for those wondering where is turn 5 then at Nürburgring, well, essentially when you come out the Mercedes arena, it's treated as a double right-hander according to some circuit maps, and that is why we have got 16 corners rather than the 15 that we thought we had earlier. But we've got a time of day change, and that means that qualifying is now going to be underway, so everybody will have 12 minutes to complete their qualifying laps and try to be on pole. Place your bets now, folks. Personally for me, I'm going to put money on the drivers we normally see on pole being right up there, if not on pole position, that being Olaf or Yaya. But qualifying is go, go, go. Once, of course, the screen updates and the circuit loads. So without further ado then, folks, here we go. 12 minutes by the end of it, by that timer at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, who is going to be on pole as all of our drivers make their way out. And our drivers should note that within the race in particular, that this time there are more stringent track limit penalties in terms of the pit lane. In the fact that if our drivers do cross that white pit exit line when they are leaving the pits in race number 3, they will be subject to much more stringent penalties than in previous seasons. That's not going to affect now, and our lead driver out the pit is the Finn of Jesus as he makes his way out of the Mercedes arena through the double right-hander of turn 4-5 and now charging all the way down towards turn 6 into sector 2. Now we are going to stay with Jesus when he goes onto a lap. We can see that Luco behind the Welshman getting himself a nice bit of room out on circuit, although the clouds have come over right now, so track temperatures are a little bit lower, but they don't affect anything within GT Sport as far as I'm aware. All of our drivers will be using this opening lap to try and build up that temperature in their tyres and also burn off a little bit of fuel. And let's just take a look around and see if anybody is using the fuel burning tactic that we typically see from some of our drivers going into the qualifying sessions. Well, Yaya in particular is definitely hanging the car in first gear right now and bouncing off the rev limiter and just trying to burn some of that fuel out of the DBR9 that he's driving as Philo squeezes his way between Yaya and Ben. Ben using a very similar tactic as well, burning some fuel out of the car. Meanwhile, Kraken is just charging around at full pace. Mamba also burning some fuel. Lawrence making his way through here. All of our drivers who are burning fuel staying off of the racing line as best they can. And Olaf coming around right now through the hairpin at turn 7 and trying to get as light a car as possible. So meanwhile, we cut back towards the chicane as Slim Jesus comes to the end of his opening warm-up lap and makes his way up towards the final hairpin, turn number 16. And as soon as he nails this, we will be on for our first flying lap of season 38. And with that, Jesus is a go. And as you can see, went a bit sideways there coming out the final hairpin. That is going to cost him a couple of miles an hour in the run down towards turn 1. But upshifting through the gear, Jesus goes up into 6th gear and now just heading up towards that rev limiter once again and braking just about 105 metres there. Getting it very nice on the brakes into turn 1 and actually upshifting to 2nd gear to open up the steering and make his way in towards turn 2. Now, is he going to nail it in terms of the apex transfer here? He does nail that weight transfer across the apex and coming down towards turn number 3, getting it very nice on the trail brake, and it goes a little bit deep, however, and that's going to cost him about 1.5 tenths as he now has to try and correct. It's going too deep into 3 through 4, and he does so very well, gets it planted out of 5, and now charging down towards turn number 6 here, going up towards 5th gear, and then braking just before the exit road come to its end, and now going through 6 and 7. It's getting a nice run through 7 here, albeit a little bit wide of apex and doesn't use the full width of the circuit, so this is a little bit of a scrappy start to sector 2 for Jesus as the Finn makes his way down towards the turn 8 hairpin right now. Now, can he make up for it at the second half of sector 2? Well, I definitely think he can if he gets a good acceleration out of the hairpin. He does. He uses the full width of the circuit, and now he's going to make his way out towards the Schumacher S, absolutely planting it on the throttle here. He's got to be brave through here. Does lift a little bit. That car's just not rotated for it as Jesus is Aston Martin DBR9. He's getting a bit of understeer through the Schumacher S here, and perhaps the tyre temperatures are just not up to speed as of yet. They're perhaps not just warm enough in order to give him the grip that he wants, and you can see he is struggling with a little bit of inherent understeer as he almost goes wide there and off at turn number 12, and now as he makes his way down towards turn 13 and up in towards the chicane of 14 and 15, it's looking a very scrappy lap by Jesus towards the end here, and I think we're going to be expecting a much faster lap from Jesus as we go deeper into this qualifying session, but he does nail the chicane very nicely, uses the track limits well, the curbs very well, and now just one corner separates him from his opening time as he makes his way through the final hairpin of turn 16, gets it very straight and narrow initially, but again very sideways out the corner, getting a lot of snap oversteer is the Finn as he comes across the line to set the pace of 156.9, and I think that is going to be beaten quite rapidly by some of our drivers as immediately Luco comes across the line to a 57.5, so not pipping Slim Jesus, but what about XE? Can he do anything better? The Polish driver sets a 158.0. Feel the Vibes meanwhile is on a personal best and immediately goes faster with a 156.3. And ZenQ coming across the line on a 58.3 right now, and Kraken Time, the Corvette driver, coming out of the final corner, going very nicely wide there, and a very stable Corvette is that C7 of Kraken as he sets a provisional P2 of 56.6, and then we see that Philo's coming across the line and going on to another lap. That is not an indicative lap, and Yaya has now set provisional pole pace, well 156.1, Yaya going fastest of all so far as the Lawrence 321 and the Mercedes AMG comes across with a 57.0, and we're looking even further back down the order now. Crowhawk into the pits for a fresh there, as is Ben MK and Olaf right now on a fast one as he comes out the final corner, and let's see what the Renault liveried Aston Martin's able to do. Powered by a Renault engine is this Aston Martin secretly. It's a 54.8! Goodness me, that's a second and a half faster than anybody from Olaf, and that's only his opening lap. We've still got just over half the session to go, and that bit of fuel burning from Olaf has helped him massively down the straights, but Olaf is the man on fire. That is a huge gap. That is absolutely stonkingly huge. Well, Olaf, I mean, if you want to make a mark on people, you've definitely done it. But we'll wait and see, of course. Olaf isn't going to get all the limelight. At least the cameraman's not going to give him all the limelight as we look towards our provisional P2 driver at the moment of Yaya. As he makes his way up towards the Schumacher S, he is down currently compared to his overall times. And I think this is not going to be an improvement from Yaya as we just watch him going in towards turn number 11 and 12. And it's not the best or cleanest of runs through 11, but he does get it very nicely notched up for turn 12, does Yaya. Now coming out of that corner, a little bit of gravel there, but he is 2.5 tenths down. So this is not going to be an improvement unless he pulls off a miracle at the chicane, which I do not think is going to happen. But meanwhile, talking about improvements, Mamba Strike on a 156.3, currently provisional P3, is on a personal best right now. We're not sure what the delta is on our timing screens. It hasn't arrived yet, but as he comes to the end of Sector 3 and he makes his way onto Sector 4, he's actually lost time through Sector 2. So that, well, sorry, it's Sector 3. So as a result, Mamba is not the man improving right now as Yaya comes into the pits for a fresh set of boots. And we can see that as Mamba comes up towards the chicane here, we're going to stay with the Renault livery driver here. I promise you I'm not being paid to just keep the camera on the Renault livery Aston Martins, but Mamba into the pits, so we hop away from him as Phil the Vibes now is on a out lap hit, well he's on a flying lap in fact, and he's just come out of the Mercedes arena and heading down towards turn 6. We look further afield of course to some of the other drivers who haven't yet set laps, for example TNR's Philo, and we're actually going to stay with Philo and ride on board with Philo and see what the British driver is able to do, the old veteran as it's been clarified to me by Benjeet in the chat, with the old veteran of GTSRL who hasn't raced a significant amount of time. As he comes down towards turn number 3, gets it very, very tight on the apex there. He's got to be careful not to put all four wheels up on the curb there as we get a friend request, which we're not going to look at for the time being. Apologies for that, ladies and gentlemen. It will go away eventually. And as now we see that Philo making his way down towards Sector 2. He's actually down in Sector 1 by 9 thousandths, but I know that he had to compromise his lap on these opening flying laps, so we do expect he's going to improve from his 209.1 so far. And as Philo makes his way down towards turn number 8, so down towards the hairpin here, gets it very nicely planted on the brakes. A wide apex here, but you've got to see he's going to swing it back nice and tight on the exit and absolutely stamp it on the throttle with a minor lift. And it was a mistake by the looks of things up at the hairpin section where he lost a lot of time because he's already improved by 8 tenths. That's where he lost the time on the lap and had to abort the lap. And now he's charging up towards turn number 11 and into 12 very shortly. Turn number 11, a little bit of an 8 understeer under braking, it's worth noting from Philo there. there, and that has cost him a little bit of turning momentum, but going through 12 just about nailed it there. A bit of an understeer on entry caused him to miss the apex by about a foot or two, but as he charges down towards turn 13 and now 14 and 15 into the chicane, this is looking a solid lap by Philo, coming down the brakes here, very hard on the brakes, down towards second gear, very planted on the brakes, it should be pointed out, and a very nice chicane as a result of it, and he's popping into the pits, is Philo. So Philo is not happy with the laps he's doing, and he's leaving it all down to the last lap effectively, is Philo. Well, that is a huge gamble, as we can see that Olaf right now is on an out lap, our provisional pole system at 54.8, and it should be pointed out, folks, that Slim Yeezers, our provisional P2 driver, has improved to a 56.0, so he has improved by 9 tenths, but the gap between himself and Olaf has improved, by the way. I should actually point this out. Olaf has just shattered the provisional P1 lap to a 54.8 now, so Olaf is just going faster and faster as Ben MK has crossed the start finish line and set a 55.6, so it is really hotting up, and the gap to pole has now dropped to just shy of 8 tenths of a second, as we see Ben MK making his way through the Mercedes arena once again. And I think it's the case that Olaf is going to be our pole sitter, but who's going to be alongside him on the front row? I think it could be anyone between Ben MK, Slim Yeezers and Yaya and Mambastrite, although do keep in mind Philo is definitely on a strong lap. He just needs to actually finish a lap to set one, because he hasn't so far. As we hot the camera away from Ben MK right now and we move around the circuit, we can see that Member Strike has now just gone on to a lap, and we'll wait and hear what's going to happen with that one. As Feel the Vibes right now, or Johnny Powell, as people know him within the GTSRL community, makes his way up towards turn number 11 on a warm-up lap, and Slim Users has come into the pits with just shy of 2 minutes of the session remaining, so he will be able to get out if he's quick enough to set one more lap, but he's got to do it quickly. And as all of our drivers are making their way around, we're going to stay with the Mercedes AMG driver of Lawrence 321, the British driver making his way through the hairpin right now at turn 8, and currently on a provisional best, where you can see he's on a 57.0 right now, and he is 3.5 tenths faster after sectors 1 and 2. Can he continue this momentum for the rest of the lap? He's got half the lap to go. A very nice run through the Schumacher S there, and now up towards turn number 11. And I think Lawrence here is on for a very nice and well sat lap, in terms of it's a very stable car, that Mercedes AMG. It's very hard to cause it to snap oversteer, even with a little bit of tuning to open up the rear end, even if you just change the brake bias, and he is now 7 tenths faster than his previous best. So Lawrence here is definitely on for a low 56 if he can nail the final sector. As he charges down, we can see that TNR Philo gets out the way urgently of Lawrence, as Philo is getting ready to go on his sole flying lap here, and Lawrence gets a nice run through the chicane, as we see Ben MK and Slim Yeezers both challenging one another for that provisional P2 slot. Ben still in provisional P2, but what about Lawrence here? He's currently provisional P8. I get the feeling this is going to move him up in towards the top 5 as Lawrence comes across the line. It's a 55, a 56.3, moving in provisional P7 and only 11th thousandths off of Feel the Vibes. But now the big question, of course, is, folks, how can any of our drivers improve towards the end, as GTSRL's XE, the Polish driver, is making his way down towards the hairpin. I think he's timed it a very close shave in terms of getting across that line before the final 12 minutes is up. We've only got one, well, we've got less than a minute to go, 40 seconds to go, but the one driver right now who everybody's probably wondering what is he doing is Philo, who is currently on a lap. So we are going to stay with Philo as he makes his way around the circuit initially, but then we do have a lot of drivers coming through. In fact, we've got one driver who's going up towards sector 4 who will be completing his final qualifying lap in the very short future. But Philo right now making his way out of sector 1, and how's this for an opening sector? Philo has set a 36.0 dead on, and that is a 10th faster than his previous best. So Philo here could be a contender for the top spots as he makes his way into sector 2. Well, we hop away from Philo very briefly, and we just try and find out who's coming through the final corner. It's Slim Yeezers, who is not going to be able to do this final lap, and we can see more drivers coming through as Yaya is on a personal best, coming out to turn 11 and into turn 12. He's currently sat on a 56.1, which was his opening flying lap, we should point out, from Yaya. Well, I say it's his opening lap. No, actually, his best lap has been his second flying lap of 54.6. A glitch on our timing screen there, folks. Well, I'm not sure what's going on with our timing screens there. I'm not going to ask about it, but they're all over the place by looks things. But Yaya right now in a provisional P5 as all of our drivers are making their way around, and Yaya in particular making his way up towards the final corner. And as he comes into turn 16, getting it nice on the brakes, and now just gradually eking that power in. The rear end getting a little bit snappy, and this will be his final lap, and it is going to be a 1:55.8 setting in provisional P4. But we hop back right now to Philo, who is on a provisional best lap, his personal best, not the fastest man out on circuit as he comes up towards the final corner. How is Philo going to settle out? As Crowed on a second. Crowhawk goes provisional P1. The Croatian with a 54.7. And what does Philo achieve in the end? Philo's going to come across the line, and it is a 54.8. And it was only 500ths off of Olaf. So Philo saving it all to the end, almost pipped Olaf onto the front row. As Olaf has responded, ladies and gentlemen, with a 54.599. So our top three are separated by the course of 3 temps. Philo in third, Crowhawk in second, and Olaf in first. That is phenomenal. So let's take you through the order very quickly, albeit XE has had to quit out to set the grid, so we will have to figure out where XE fits into all this. Pole position goes in the end to the British driver of Olaf with 54.599. That is a phenomenal nap by the Brit, but he was very closely chased by the Croatian of Crowhawk 1950 with a 54.775. They form your front row. Your second row will be started by TNR's Philo, the British driver leaving it all to the last minute and doing a very good job of doing so. And then 5 temps down on him was Phil the Vibes, another British driver who has done very well for this qualifying session. Your third row will be started off by Ben MK, albeit Yaya will be alongside him. And then it will be Slim Yeezus, who has, well, as we get another notification card, we're going to have to disable those after qualifying is complete. Slim Yeezus from Finland will be starting off your fourth row, and alongside him will be Mamba Strike from the United Kingdom. Fifth row of the grid will be started off by Lawrence 321 in the Mercedes. Not having the best of qualifying in the end. Lawrence was showing a lot of promise, but that Mercedes looks very stable for the race, and he is going to be joined alongside by having a cracking time. And then we are going to have a Luco starting off our 6th row, and alongside him will be Zen Q-Meister. Although I do think that XE was approximately P9, some of these latter positions will be dropped by 1. But that gives you a good idea of the grid order for this one, as we're waiting for our grid to now be set up for race number 1. And as we hop away from trackside very briefly, we're just going to make some adjustments to turn off all of our notifications. So please excuse me for 1 second, folks, because I think you'll all agree with me. It's very annoying when we get something appear and block half the screen, and we do not need it. Right, those are gone. They are dead and dusted. We are not going to be seeing any more of those cheeky notifications, and we are all sorted there. And that was absolutely phenomenal. Although I think some drivers were caught out by the extended pit time at the circuit, and as a result they weren't able to get in that one last lap that could have seen them improve. None more so than the Finn of Slim Users, who unfortunately just couldn't get across the line in time when the 12 minutes expired. A couple of our drivers right now taking a quick comfort break before we get underway with race number 1. We are currently 15 minutes behind schedule, but I can assure you it will be worth it once we get underway with the racing. Excuse me. In the meantime, we are hearing a little bit of a trackside discussion, a warning to some of our drivers about using slipstream qualifying. Now, for those wondering why is it an important subject to discussion, well, slipstream qualifying, with the slipstream zone being 7.5 tenths from the guy in front, will give you an advantage on the straights and in some of the faster corners where you can maintain the momentum and build up a little bit more apex speed as a result, albeit you do have the dirty air to contend with, but if you can master it, then as a result, it means that you're able to gain time over the course of a lap. Our drivers are required not to use the slipstream of another car within qualifying, or they need to give themselves enough space so that way they can argue the case that when they started their lap there was no expectation that they were going to pick up the slipstream over the course of the lap. Of course, if a driver ahead of them suddenly makes a mistake and falls a lot closer to them, then it's anybody's game, albeit normally they'd be expected to abort the lap, but when you're on a fast lap or your final lap of the session, you're probably not going to abort it. But I think some drivers are just being reminded of the rules there, because there were a couple of drivers, although we didn't see it on camera specifically, where they may have been using a little bit of a tow to benefit them on some of their flying laps. But I think it's all going to calm down. There's not going to be anything major, and we will wait and find out what's going to happen come race number 1. As we're about to get underway, ladies and gentlemen, we have been informed race number 1 is about to occur, and I think there's going to be some stewards questions. at the end of tonight with regards to qualifying, but I think it will be more warnings than anything else as everybody is readying up, and we are going to be a go any minute now. And place your bets, ladies and gentlemen, who is going to be our race winner at the end of race number 1. As we can see, we have got a cheeky little bot in our stream, and we are going to block it out of the stream. But here we go, as we say hello to Urem in the chat. It is race number 1, 5 laps, ladies and gentlemen, and by the end of it, who's going to be your race winner? So as we pan down towards the grid then, on your right hand side, Olaf. On your left hand side, meanwhile, it is the challenger of Crowhawk. Behind him, TNR's Philo and Feel the Vibes. And Yaya in 5th. What can he do after a difficult qualifying session in the end? 5 laps will tell the tale. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's lights out, and away we go, and immediately all of our drivers trying to get the best possible start, none more so than Slim Users, who tries to pull out but tucks back into 6th. Olaf getting a very strong start, immediately holding on to first place in the run down towards turn 1, although there's a massive concertina effect into turn 1, and Slim Users find himself sandwiched in the run into turn 1 and dropping down to P7 as a result of it, getting squeezed towards the fin by 2 British, a bit of a British sandwich with a fin inside it there, as we see all of our drivers making their way into the Mercedes arena, and Yaya going defensive versus Ben MK, the 2 teammates there, not making sure to take one another out, but Feel the Vibes having to go defensive in check versus Yaya as they come out of turn 4 into 5, and now as they all make their way out of sector 1 and down towards sector 2, it is Olaf ahead right now, but you can see further back in your picture that we have got the Mercedes of Lawrence in P8 at the moment. Doing a good job is Lawrence to try and hold on to that position, but he is being very heavily attacked right now by Ben MK and also Mamba Strike, and Ben MK has got past Lawrence, as you can see that Slim Users is coming back at Ben in fact, and Lawrence is trying to get on in the action here, and as they go down towards turn 8 for the first time of asking, Ben going to the inside of Slim Users goes a bit deep on the braking, locking out that front left-hand brake, and it means that Ben is going to be side by side. Now, who is going to give way? It is going to be Ben who gives way to Slim Users. There's no way you could go side by side through the Schumacher S, not without a major speed drop, but as we look up towards the front of our order, we can see that Feel the Vibes has had a disaster, and there's a near accident as Ben MK has to take to the cross, and I think that was a very close to fatal incident there for Ben MK's race 1, as he just dodged a massive bombshell, and he's back into P6, and Ben MK doing a lot of rallycross, but doing a very good job of showing us why he's considered to be a very versatile driver, as he's going to have to give the position up to Mamba Straight. He hasn't got the momentum, and as they all come out towards the chicane in the race for P4 right now, or P5 I should point out, there's contact, and it looks as though Kraken has been squeezed quite heavily. We will see what's going to happen with regards to that very shortly, but as they come out of the final hairpin for the first time, it is Olaf 4 tenths ahead of Crowhawk, the Croatian chasing him hard. TNR's Philo behind by 8 tenths a second. Behind them it's Slim Users, who's 2.7 seconds back, leading the pursuit for P4, and it's Feel the Vibes in P5, followed by Mamba Strike. Then it's Lawrence, Luco, GTSRL XE, and well, it looks as though they're saying Yaya is making a move here on GTS XE, or is it XE going up the inside of Yaya? And as they run down towards turn 1, XE cannot hold on. It was Yaya going for the move, and XE drops down towards P10. And behind them, Zenq and to make up for lost time as Ben MK is battling with him, and on the inside for turn 2. And Zenq being pushed a little wide there. He's got to take to the outside line. And Ben MK is going fully defensive versus the Polish driver, is the Brit, as Kraken Time is right behind the pair of them right now, and having to try and make up for all the losses on the opening lap. It was a very difficult one. And as we see, moving down towards the second sector for the second time of asking, well, our top 3 drivers are really just pulling the weight. And in the rear of your camera shot there, as we switch to them, Feel the Vibes having to go ultra defensive coming out of turn number 7 versus Mamba Strike, and Vibes right now is really struggling to get away from this, despite the fact Lawrence is going to say, well, I'll give you a hand, Feel the Vibes, as we ride on board with Lawrence here, and he makes his way up towards the Schumacher S's. Now keep in mind, this Mercedes has proven to be the most stable of the cars that we've seen out of the circuit, and Lawrence doing his utmost here really to try and utilise the stability of his Mercedes, but you can see that behind him Mamba Strike is literally on a striking potential here. That Aston Aston Martin in the hands of the British driver is just so fast in those acceleration zones, particularly in its fourth gear. He has tuned that fourth gear for pure acceleration, and it is showing as we see Lawrence go a little bit wide there, coming out to turn number 12 and running down towards 13 right now. But Lawrence is going to have to run here on Feel the Vibes. He's up into P5, but Vibes is going defensive on the inside for the chicane, and he's going to force the situation, and Vibes holds on for another run of the chicane. But surely one of them is going to get through soon, because Vibes right now is having to defend like a madman in order to hold on. Although credit to Vibes, he's doing a great job of it, but I don't see it lasting forever before something's going to find a chink in his armour, because he is having to work so hard so early on, and he's got to consider his stamina here, and the fact we've got 2 more races after this one, and he doesn't want to throw it all away after one race. As we see, meanwhile, the other Mercedes driver, apart from Lawrence, of Luco 33, making his way down towards turn 1 in P9 right now, and not able to do too much, as Yaya is up into P7 versus Mamba Strike. So Yaya now on the hunt against Lawrence and Feel the Vibes. But right now, we are going to take a very quick hop back to see what on earth happened on lap number 1. With regards to Kraken time here. So we're going to ride on board with Kraken as they make their way up towards the chicane, and I think Kraken is going to get squeezed very heavily or try and find a way through. So he goes for the move here, and he has to take evasive action. He missed his braking point and knocked Ben MK, so that explains why Ben MK got reset and put all the way down the bottom of the order. So there you go, folks, that's why Ben MK lost out so much. But meanwhile, in the battle for the lead, Olaf has been passed by Crowhawk, and Crowhawk is up into P1, and we missed that off camera. We'll try and catch that very shortly for you folks. We'll get a replay of that. But you can see that Crowhawk now leading, and Philo 2 seconds back cannot capitalise on this battle for the race win. But Philo is in a very comfortable P3 right now, albeit Slim Jesus is catching up, and that gap has dropped by 5 tenths over the course of lap 2. Feel the Vibes right now still holding on to P5, and he's got himself a seconds gap to Lawrence. And I think Lawrence is driving very defensively versus Yaya right now, and I don't think Lawrence has the outright pace to change Feel the Vibes. Vibes has just needed a little bit of breathing room, and he's been able to pull away. But you get the feeling from Yaya's perspective right now, he can sense the top 5, and it's within his grasp. He just needs to go grab it. But meanwhile, up front, we can see Crowhawk holding off Olaf very well right now, and pulling a little bit of a gap, getting very jumpy over the exit of the chicane there, the exit apex there of turn 15. And what that means is they come around to complete lap number 3 and move on to lap number 4. Crowhawk is now the man who's got to try and pull away from the fast charging Biscuit of Olaf, and I think the Biscuit Muncher is going to absolutely go for it versus the Croatian, as we've got 2 laps to go, and he is getting ever closer. Now, will there be a move down to turn 1? He immediately starts to pull to the inside, but I think this is more of a dummy rather than an attempt just to try and put Crowhawk off, and it didn't work that time. But of course, Olaf will be sizing up his opponent for a final lap dash. As we look further back into turn 1, and we can see Yaya trying to go around the outside of Lawrence, and I think he's going to have it. He's got to get that momentum, and he doesn't quite get the momentum into turn 2, and behind them it's all kicking off. Ben MK up to P9 and Exy up into P10, and behind these guys Kraken right now in P11 ahead of Luco. So it has been all chop and change towards the rear of the order, although we haven't seen it on camera because we've been focusing further up the grid. We can see that Luco and Kraken coming to blows, and Kraken not stable in that C7. I think he's just having difficulty in getting that rear end planted out some of the corners as they make their way down towards turn 6 on lap number 4. And as we look back up towards the front, Crowhawk doing enough to hold off Olaf for now, and I really do think that Olaf is sizing up his prey and looking to snatch it and snatch that win on the final lap, because he's so close to the back of Crowhawk, but he's not going for the move. He is sizing up his opponent as the Finnish driver of Slim Jesus right now in P4 in a very comfortable position, albeit he's lost a second to Philo over the course of lap 3.5 of 4, and that means that really Feel the Vibes now is trying to close up to Slim Jesus. That gap has dropped to 1.1 seconds, and the gap between Vibes in P5 to Lawrence in P6 has opened up to 1.3 seconds. So Lawrence right now going to go defensive, and it's a good thing we cut back then, because we can see there's a 2-for-1 special on offer, and Yaya has got the pass on Lawrence, but Mamba Strike's going to try and go around the outside of Lawrence at turn 12, and he doesn't quite do it, and Lawrence immediately tucks into the slipstream of Yaya, and Mamba does the same, tucking in behind Lawrence. He's going to try and go for the move, I reckon, up into the chicane, and Lawrence goes ultra defensive here, and that means that Mamba has to cut to the outside and take the natural line, and he's trying to compromise Lawrence as much as possible, but that Mercedes is so strong in its brakes. As we see behind all this, Luco is up into P10 as Kraken gets it wrong at the chicane and has to back out of it, and Zenku has fallen down somewhere along that line as well. As we move on to the final lap, the white flag is out, and we can see that Crowhawk here 1 second ahead of Olaf. Olaf has lost a huge amount of time versus Crowhawk, and I think he's perhaps decided, you know what, just back off of it now and wait for the next race, because you're going to come P2 anyway. It's not as though you're losing out massively over the course of race 1 if you come P2 versus P1. It's the final race where you want the massive result because of the bonus points. But I know that Olaf is very competitive as well, and he won't want to give up a position if he doesn't have to. But Yaya right now doing everything he can, the 364 driver, to hold on to P6 versus Lawrence, but Lawrence is all over the back of him, and it really is the case that our drivers are absolutely piling on the pressure, as Jesus is now starting to feel the pressure from Feel the Vibes, the British driver hunting down the Finn and getting ever closer, albeit it looks as though Jesus just has a small pace advantage in Sector 2. That gap keeps oscillating between 3 tenths of a second, 3 tenths of a second and 1.1 seconds, but we look back to P6 once again, and Yaya doing everything to hold on right now, as up front Crowhawk is doing everything right to hold on to the race win, as they come into the third sector, the Schumacher S, and they've only got one more sector to go after turns 11 and 12. But looking further back, Yaya still comfortably holding on to P6, and Slim Jesus now getting away from Feel the Vibes, as we see Mamba Strike trying to go for a move here versus Lawrence. It's going to be on the final sector, the final lap if he's going to go for it, as Lawrence is struggling so much to get any performance out of the Mercedes, out of the Schumacher S, but he knows how to defend his position well, and he's doing that. He is going for it to his utmost, and meanwhile up front, I should tell you that Olaf has not closed up, but as we look back to Yaya and also to Lawrence, Mamba Strike going to the outside out of 12, and he's going to use the runoff space to get the move on Lawrence, and he's got it done, ladies and gentlemen. We come back to the front, and your race winner after 5 laps on race 1 is Crowhawk by 7 tenths over Olaf, who comes home in P2, and in third place it goes to TNR's Philo. Behind them it's Slim Jesus, who holds on to P4 ahead of Feel the Vibes, and it's Yaya in P6. Lawrence in the end got back ahead for P7 versus Mamba Strike and Ben MK in P9, and behind them in P10, rounding off our top 10, it is Luco 33 ahead of XE, and it's Kraken Time in P12, and last but not least, ZenQ Meister from Poland. Well, that is race 1, ladies and gentlemen. Congratulations to all of our racers, but of course, more importantly, congratulations to our race winner, Crowhawk. Well, that was an absolutely brilliant start to tonight's proceedings, and you know what the crazy thing is? Our predictions were that Olaf was going to get the win, or at least the predictions in chat were that Olaf was going to get the win by a margin. But as we can see from the race results, subject to any stewards' questions and inquiries, of course, it is Crowhawk from the GTHR community who brought home the win in race number 1. The Croatian finishing ahead of Olaf, who went P2, and TNR Philo rounding off the podium. Our top 5 was rounded off by the Finn of Slim Jesus ahead of Feel the Vibes, who held on to P5 in the end after a lot of pressure in the opening half of the race. The fastest lap went to Olaf on lap number 5, where 1:55.243. Well, goodness me, what a brilliant opening race. And, well, it was an upset in terms of results and fortunes for a good number of drivers there. And I think we're going to have quite a mixed order for race number 2 as a result. Now, of course, what this being the first race of the season, a lot of drivers have got a lot of adrenaline pumping. We also had the wait, the extended delay to qualifying and subsequently getting race number 1 underway. The question that's going to be hanging on a lot of drivers right now is, okay, I've used all that energy, that pent-up adrenaline for race 1. Now what have I got in the tank for races 2 and 3? And some of our drivers may just need to turn it down a little bit for race number 2 in preparation for the extended race of 3. But we will wait and find out. I get the feeling a lot of drivers are going to simply go for it in race 2 to get themselves best placed for the more strategic race that is race number 3 here. But we're just waiting now for confirmation that things are going to get underway once again as people are readying up to go around the circuit. I'm going to take a very quick sip of water because I'm going to be losing my vocal cords otherwise in very short order. And I think that was only race 1, folks. Now, other things to observe, we did see a lot of attempted moves going into the chicane, as we would expect. It's one of the typical overtaking spots, but we also saw some brilliant moments running up towards turn number 11, coming out the Schumacher S up into the left-hander, where we saw drivers in particular losing a lot of momentum through the Schumacher S's versus some of the others. Most important one, of course, there being the momentum loss by the Mercedes driver of, if we can find him around the circuit, or I think he perhaps hasn't readied up at the moment. But Mr. 123, our purple Mercedes driver, who lost a lot of momentum out the Schumacher S's. But really, we're just counting down now. As you can hear that gentle rumble there of the V12 engine of that Aston Martin. Indeed, that's what a number of our drivers will be doing right now. They'll just be rumbling and, well, meditating in preparation for another race. Now, for those wondering about tyre wear and fuel consumption, we have our tyre wear set to ×3, and it will be that for the entirety of this season on the racing medium tyres that all of our drivers are expected to use. And the fuel consumption of ×2, fuel not being an issue, of course, in any of our races. But tyres will be a consideration for race number 3. And also our drivers will need to be keeping an eye on their tyre wear over the course of races, as race 2 is now about to come at you, folks. And we get another 5 laps of racing underway. Place your bets. Will Crowhawk be able to make it 2 out of 2, or will we see a new winner? So as we pan down to the grid then, on your right this time it is going to be Crowhawk. On your left, meanwhile, it'll be Olaf. Behind them, TNR, Philo and Slim Users. But keep an eye out for ZenQ, who's starting right at the back, having had a disastrous race one. What can he do starting from last? And it's lights out, and away we go once again. And Olaf getting a much better start by comparison with Crowhawk. And Crowhawk immediately going defensive. And Olaf's already jumped in. There's been a major accident on the start-finish straight. Before we even get into the first corner, one driver being spun into the wall. We will double-check what's happened there very shortly for you folks. But that was a very disastrous start for one poor soul who's all the way at the back, as Crowhawk is back into the lead for the time being. But we can see that Olaf right now is really under a lot of stress and duress from TNR Philo going through the Mercedes arena. And Ben MK sliding his way up into what is P5, and Olaf has lost out massively in the opening sector versus Philo and Crowhawk, although he seemed to have it done. And behind them, Yaya and Ben MK battling, the two teammates battling each other side by side into turn 6, and that's not what you want to do. You don't want to be battling with your teammate. But Yaya's probably screaming right now, get out of the way, Ben, I'm so much faster, just get out of the way, because I've got a fast charging Mercedes behind me. It looks angry, it's got a big mesh grille, and it's trying to get through, and Lawrence can't find a way past Yaya initially, but he goes to the cut back into the hairpin, and he gets it done. The Mercedes driver is up into P5, although it's Yaya going to try and squeeze him out, going into the Schumacher as he does. He forces the move, and that means now Lawrence loses all the momentum, and Feel the Vibes goes alongside him as well. That was very risky by Yaya, but it's worked out this time, and Feel the Vibes is battling with Lawrence, and Lawrence is so late on the brakes. That is his strength. The British driver has very strong brakes in that Mercedes, down into P7 as we look further back down the order, and what we can see is Mamba striking P8 right now, and XC having started much further down the order up into P9, but battling with Cracker Time as they make their way up into the chicane for the first time of asking, and they're side by side, and XC is losing out initially, but is he going to try and hold the line? No, he doesn't. He avoids attacking his teammate. The two poles working together in 10th and 11th. So after one lap then, as they come out the final corner on lap number 1, it is the British driver of Philo is ahead of Crowhawk and overtaking him into the chicane, and Crowhawk in P2, Olaf in P3, but closely chasing them. Ben MK in P4, Yaya in P5, Feel the Vibes in P6, Lawrence in P7. As hold on second, folks, we see that Crowhawk and Philo are battling into turn 1 for the lead, and Crowhawk is on the inside, and he squeezes Philo wide. But Philo doesn't have the momentum to come back at him in turn 2. Although Philo looks at it, that looked a very, very vengeful Philo. But he goes wide as a result of his manoeuvre there into turn 2. It's all fair and game, so he's trying to sight Crowhawk out, and it almost worked. Crowhawk went very deep into turn 3. And now coming through 4 and 5, Crowhawk has lost a lot of momentum. I do not think Crowhawk is going to be getting away with this one. I think Philo is coming back at him in short order as Philo looks to the inside into turn 6, and Crowhawk just shuts the door in time. It was very close to being a closed door on on the nose into the car there. Lawrence in P7 right now, Mamba Strike in P8, having a cracking time in P9, GTSRL Sexy in P10, followed by ZenQ in P11, Luco in P12, and then Slim Yeezus all the way down P13, and we will find out what happened to him very shortly, folks, as we see that Crowhawk has held off Philo for the time being, and Philo now feeling a lot of pressure from Olaf. So we are going to hop back and find out what happened to Yeezus on the race start. So as we hop all the way back to the beginning, we're going to stay with Yeezus here and try to figure out what happened. And he's going to get the launch here, but does he simply get tapped by someone, or does he get it wrong? And he had to take evasive action, and he got clipped by Philo as a result of taking evasive action from the lead drivers there. So that explains what happened to our Finnish driver at the start and why he's so far down the order. That was very unfortunate. I think that's going to get reported to the stewards because that was a very difficult one there. But again, where could he have gone? It'll probably be pulled as a racing incident. But enough about theory crafting, what the stewards have got to deal with. We're not here for that. We're here to commentate for you. And we can see that Philo right now picking up a 1.5 second penalty for a track limits cut at the chicane. So Philo is going to have to burn that coming across the start-finish line here, and that means he is going to drop down the order massively. If he doesn't burn it now, he's going to have to burn it imminently towards the end of the next lap. He's burning it already. I think he's realised that he needed to burn it, so Olaf is now up into P2 and can go chasing after Crowhawk. And meanwhile, in the battle for P3, Philo having to defend against Ben MK, and Philo is going for as much defence as possible and trying to say to Ben MK, look, I got a penalty, but you're not going to get the place because of it. That is so difficult. As we say hello to Killing Speed in the chat, but meanwhile, feel the vibes, battling with Yaya right now and holding on to that P5, and it's a repeat from earlier, and Yaya goes to the inside at turn 3, and he's going to go for the round hook here, but Feel the Vibes goes deep through 4 and 5, and it means that he's going to go wide. He's got to be careful not to go too wide because he'll lose the rear end of the car, and he just about catches it. Good catch by the British driver there as Yaya goes to the inside on turn 6, side by side, and as they come out of 6 into 7, there's contact. There is a lot of contact as Yaya gets some snap oversteer. And Feel the Vibes loses the momentum as a result, as Lawrence now tries to find his way back past while the Mercedes drivers here trying to go from P7 to P6 in short order. And I think that Lawrence senses that he can get a top 5 if he just plays his cards right. But of course, that Mercedes loses so much momentum through the chicane, or not through the chicane, through the Schumacher. So he's got to be careful not to lose it this time as they make their way for the Schumacher S in this battle for P5. As we hop on board right now with Mamba Strike and we look forward from his car, we can see that he's got the whole face full of Mercedes ahead of it. He's got to try and find a way past because he'll want to get to that top 5 as he almost loses it a little bit coming out of turn 11 and into 12, but he nails it in 12. And now as we hop away from his car and move on to one of our other drivers here, and we're going to be hopping backwards towards P9, having a cracking time in a very lonely P9. And meanwhile, the two Polish drivers of XC and ZenQ battling one another for P10. Well, they won't want to take one another out because they're both part of the same team. ZenQ trying to squeeze his way through his teammate here, and he does so, but that was very near the mark as we come on to lap number 4, and it will be led by Crowhawk initially ahead of Olaf. The gap is 7.2 tenths as they make their way across the line and down towards turn 1 for 2 more times to go. And you can see that Philo is trying to catch up to our leaders, and he has closed that gap already to 1.4 seconds. And Philo is a man on a charge. He is possessed right now. It is pure menace and frustration in that guy's eyes after that penalty, and he wants to get back up towards that top step of the podium. Behind him, Ben MK just cannot keep up at this point, and that gap is opening up little by little. It's now a second, but Ben MK will use that as security as Yaya is still battling with Feel the Vibes. This battle for P5 is not ending anytime soon as we look back from Yaya's car right now, and what we can see is that Yaya is essentially trying to get Lawrence in on the mix. Feel the Vibes has to go defensive here up into turn 6, and as they make their way into 7 now, Feel the Vibes is still holding on, but you can see what Yaya's trying to do is put his car in a position where he gives Lawrence the tow for a little bit, so that way Lawrence is able to get down the inside, because that's the one thing Lawrence is strong at, is he tries to go for those moves up the inside of drives because of how strong the brakes are on that Mercedes and how stable it is under braking and power after the apex. And that's the one thing Lawrence is doing very well, as he almost catches the side of Feel the Vibes there, almost gets along the rear quarter panel of Feel the Vibes, but it's not enough as they go up towards the Schumacher S's, and now he's got to do it all again, has Lawrence, because this is where he loses all the momentum. And you can see Mamba Strike is all over the back of him and going for a move to the outside into turn 11, but he's not able to do it around the outside. It's a very difficult one to the outside. I think Mamba's trying to master the cut back there, and it's just not happening. But meanwhile, up front, Crowhawk still leading by 6.5 tenths versus Olaf right now. No change, although that gap has come down by 1/10 of a second over the course of the lap. Meanwhile, further back in the battle for P7, I can tell you that Mamba Strike is still trying to find a way past Lawrence, and he's trying to do everything he can to get Lawrence to drive defensively and brake too late into the corners. But surely Mamba's got to realise Lawrence is not a man to be making a mistake on the brake. Instead, he is the master of the brake, and as a result, that purple AMG Mercedes is not going anywhere wrong anytime soon, as we see Kraken having to burn a penalty. That is so unfortunate for the Corvette driver, because he was up into P9, and now he drops all the way down the order, and we can see towards the rear of the order, Kraken now in P11, and meanwhile, looking up front, we can see side by side with XE here, as they're trying to make their way towards Luco, who's in P10, and XE going to the inside for P11 here, and attacking to turn 1. It hasn't worked out, because Kraken has got the cutback into turn 2, and it means that Kraken has got the inside now for the Mercedes Arena. And will XE try to lunge it in here? I don't think he's close enough to even consider lunging it, but Kraken has gone deep into 3, but XE has cut 3 quite heavily. That could be a penalty as a result. It's not quite a penalty, he just nailed it in terms of how tight he can go, and Slim uses his 2 seconds off the back of this, but I don't think he's getting into the action at the end of this race. But meanwhile, up front in the pursuit for the race win, there is only a 1.5 second gap between Philo in third and Crowhawk in the lead, and Olaf is only half a second off the back of Crowhawk, and those tired legs are starting to kick in now for the Croatian up front, I think, because Olaf has been building this momentum over the course of the last couple of laps. It was a difficult start for Olaf, but now he's coming on strong. Will he find a way past the Croatian at the end of this lap? It will tell you very shortly. But meanwhile, in the battle for P4, Ben MK is being caught by Yaya, albeit it's a very gradual catch-up here. It's not too fast, as Yaya has got past Feel the Vibes, it should be pointed out, and Feel the Vibes in P6 now as a result of that. But up front, what I'm hearing is that Olaf is getting ever closer to the back of Crowhawk as they all charge down towards the chicane for the last time of asking. And will Olaf go for a last-minute move on the brakes? He doesn't. He plays it safe, and I think that is it in terms of our race leaders. And we look further back, and we do not see a move from Feel the Vibes to P5, so that means as they come out the final corner, it is going to be back-to-back wins for the Croatian of Crowhawk 1950 as he holds off Olaf once again, and behind them in P3, frustrated at what could have been, is TNR Philo. P4 is going to go to Ben MK, and in the race to the finish line, it will be Yaya in P5 ahead of Feel the Vibes in P6, Lawrence in P7, Mamba Strike in P8, then ZQ Biester in P9, Luco rounded off our top 10, and then having a cracking time ahead of XE and Slim Users for the final 3 positions. Congratulations to all our drivers, but congratulations to our back-to-back winner, Crowhawk from Croatia. And as we briefly catch our breath, we take a look at those final results. And again, subject to any steward's inquiries, here are your standings, folks. After race number 2, it is Crowhawk winning by 0.4 of a second over Olaf, and TNR Philo finishing third. Our top 5 being rounded out by Ben MK, who started P9 in race number 2, making up 5 positions over the course of the race. Well done to Ben. And then our top 5 being rounded out by Yaya, who just pit Feel the Vibes. But it's a very close rivalry between those two, and we can expect even more of it. And perhaps Lawrence 321, who finished P7, and will be able to finally pick up a top 5 at the end of race number 3. The fastest lap this time going to Philo on lap number 5, a 1:54.958. The fastest lap we have seen in race pace conditions tonight so far. And I'll tell you one thing, whilst Lawrence is saying right now in the race chat, as you can see on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, that he's got no chance in the AMG, he is doing a phenomenal job in making that AMG work. He needs to give himself some credit for that. He may not have the pace in the acceleration zones, particularly the 3rd and 4th gear acceleration zones, but those brakes in that AMG and its exit stability coming out of the low-speed apex corners, such as the hairpin at turn 8, are what are giving everybody behind him and in front of him a huge headache. Lawrence is very strong in that Mercedes. He shouldn't be doubting himself, in my opinion. But still, that's up for him to do. We're not going to provide any more faults. And now, as we're waiting for the final race to get underway, let's talk a little bit about the final race. So, it's 10 laps. And the big question is, we're a mandatory pit stop in this one. Do you take on a fresh set of tyres, or do you go to the end and just simply come into the pits and come straight out? Fuel isn't a concern, of course, but do you go for that fresh set of tyres? I think our race leaders will do what they typically do in EU Division 1. They'll pit as late as possible. They'll work together effectively. They won't fight each other too much, and they'll just simply try and work together to pull away from the field, and then they'll start to race each other as they come onto the final 3 to 4 laps. Meanwhile, further down the order, in those battles for P4 and further back, I think we're going to be seeing drivers take on fresh sets of tyres, but the question for them all will be, when are they going to pit? Now, given the fact that we have seen a lot of overtaking tonight, we have seen overtaking left, right, centre, up, down the field, I would say you want to pit early for this one, because you cannot afford to get stuck in a fight for too long. And we'll give you a brilliant example. Ben MK started P9, made his way up into P4, and the reason he didn't have too much pressure in the end, not saying Ben MK didn't have outright pace or anything like that, but you've got to give credit as well to the fact that because the battle for P5 between Vibes, Yaya and Lawrence and Mamba went on for so long and over so many laps, and they were constantly chopping and changing, any pace those guys did have to catch Ben was nullified over the course of the 2 to 3 laps where they had the opportunity to catch him. Now Ben had to put in the effort, but remember, he had a simple case of he just had to focus on his pace. He didn't have to look at his rear view mirror, and that is the thing that Sava drivers will need to keep in mind now. With a pit stop available, they can avoid getting caught in those unnecessary fights, and they can give themselves the better strategic opportunity at the end of the race. But we'll see how it plays out. And thank you folks for the feedback so far, and I'm glad to hear that you're all enjoying it. And be sure, if you haven't already said hello in the Twitch chat, feel free to say hi if you've got the capacity to do so, or feel free to let me know what's been your favourite moment so far or what you're expecting in race number 3, because it's great to have you all here. It's great to be here down at trackside, albeit virtual trackside, and it has been some fantastic racing today, I tell you. But really, so far, my favourite moment has got to have been the battle for the race win. It's very unfortunate for Philo, but we will wait and see what's going to happen. We're going to have a quick sip of water whilst we've got an opportunity before our trackside steward decides to start the race. I think some of our drivers are having a brief comfort break. And as we patiently wait for the final race of tonight to get underway, I do think we are going to see a different race winner in race 3. I don't want to put it down to whether it's going to be Philo or Olaf, but I think one of the two is going to pick Crow Hawk. I think Crow Hawk's done a great job, but I just think the tired legs are going to catch up. As we continue to look at Ben MK as he makes his way through the Mercedes arena once again. And as much, folks, as I'm being asked in the chat to have some Portuguese wine or a bit of coral beer after commentating tonight, I've got to work tomorrow, so unfortunately I can't drink as much as I'd love to. And we've got 2 more nights of commentating to do before I'm allowed technically a break, so no, I can't drink. We've got to focus on the racing. Don't drink and drive, folks. And don't drink and commentate either, unless you're James Hunt, of course. The Formula 1 legend who's sadly no longer with us, but the man who can be quoted as saying that sex is the breakfast of champions. Now, for those wondering about the tuning and what our drivers have done to their cars, if you look at Ben MK's car as he's making his way into the braking zones, when we get a good, nice side-on view, what you're going to see is the rear of the car is much higher to the ground versus the front, and that's called maximum rake. As we get underway with race number 3, here we go, folks, the grand finale for tonight. It is going to be the strategy race, 10 laps. Who is going to be your race winner by the end of it as Ben decides to cut the entirety of the chicane? Masterclass there, Ben. Let's wind down. So as we pan down to the grid then for the final time tonight, it is Crowhawk on your right, Olaf on your left, Philo behind alongside Ben MK. But watch out this time for Slim User starting at the back after a disastrous start. What can he do from P13? It's lights out and away we go, and Olaf again getting a very good start, but Crowhawk nailing the start a bit better this time, but losing some momentum, and he's immediately trying to shut the door as Ben MK gets a very strong launch for a P4 and tries to go on the inside, and he's going for the move already as Ben MK as they make their way into turn 1. That is one heck of a launch from Ben MK, and it means that he's pushing his way into turn 2, and he's trying to squeeze Philo to the outside, and I think he's going to have it into turn 3. Well, this is an upset for the books, and this is going to give Olaf the opportunity, if he ever needed one, to try and break away. But Philo is on the inside for 4 and 5, and that means Ben isn't going to be able to get into second and get the move done, but Crowhawk has been forced backwards, and Feel the Vibes is up into P5, Lawrence in P6, and that's exactly where Lawrence will have wanted to be. Look at the traffic jam of cars that is behind Lawrence, and Yo-Yo trying to find a way through, but he's not able to find a way through the Mercedes into 7, and that means now Lawrence is going to essentially separate the field before they've even done a single lap. Well, what a brilliant start for the Mercedes driver, getting himself into P6 and essentially putting himself in that commanding position, as we can see behind ZenQ up into P8 and battling Mamba Strike, and he's going to be on the inside up into the Schumacher S, and ZenQ is not going to back out of that. Mamba Strike is going to back out of it, however, and that means ZenQ is holding on to P8 right now, as we see behind Cracker Time up into P10, and Slim Users gaining 2 positions already in 2 sectors. Luco in P12 and XC in P13. But as we look back towards the front, we can see that Olaf is leading right now ahead of Philo, and it's Ben MK who is just struggling to stay with Philo, and it means we can expect surely that Crowhawk is going to go for a move very soon on Ben, because he will not want to be behind the British driver for more than 1 or 2 laps, as they all come down towards the chicane there for the first time of asking, and it is side by side between ZenQ and Kraken, as it looks though Mamba's got back in front, and ZenQ is able to hold on for the time being as Kraken has to go wide through there, and Kraken is sliding all over the place, and Slim is already into the pits. The Finnish driver is into the pits, and we've got one other driver as well into the pits of Ben MK. So after lap 1, it is Olaf ahead of Philo, followed by Crowhawk, and then Feel the Vibes in P4, Yaya in P5, Lawrence in P6, ahead of Mamba Strike, followed by ZenQ, the Herod of Kraken Time in P9, Luco in P10, and it is GTSRL's XC in P11, and Slim Users and Ben MK both going into the pits. And to give you an idea of how much time is lost in the pits, as Ben MK and Slim Users both go for a tyre change here, it should be noted, folks, Ben MK has lost the best part of what is approximately 20 seconds to his competitors. So that is the pit stop lost time there for a tyre change. It is 20 seconds, and now everybody's going to be aware of that, and Ben MK no more so, as he's now going to use that fresh set of tyres to simply put in the laps and try and jump as many people as possible, because I think he knew he wasn't going to be able to hold on to P3 for much longer versus Crowhawk, but he's bought himself the time and space, and Feel the Vibes is actually getting quite close to the back of Crowhawk right now, as it should be noted that Yaya has made his way up into P5, but look at Lawrence, here comes that purple Mercedes as it looks to the outside into the hairpin, but Yaya says, no, you're not coming through this time, Mr. AMG man. I've had enough of your tricks, I've had enough of you planting that car in my face, and I'm going to put my rear end in your face now, and you're going to have to deal with it. And Yaya has every right to do so, because Lawrence has literally been the bane of his existence all evening, but it's been perhaps the best rivalry of the night, as Mamba Strike is over the back of them, and ZenQ runs wide over the Schumacher S. That is a disaster for ZenQ. He's going to lose 2 places, and Luca, I think, picked up a half-second penalty somewhere for track limits. I think that's out of the Schumacher S's as well, so both drivers had a bit of a difficulty there through the legendary Schumacher corner, as we see them all come out of turn 11 up into 12 and 13. As they all make their way down towards the chicane, then Olaf leading by 1.1 seconds now. The thing about Olaf is, will he try and pace himself to Philo, or will he go all in at this point? Because surely he's got to have on his mind that Ben MK right now is making his way around on circuit on very fresh tyres, having pitted so early on. As Feel the Vibes, and we see Crowhawk into the pit. So this is in response, I reckon, to Ben MK. And has Crowhawk done enough to try and jump Ben MK for a single lap and this early pit stop? But of course, remember, this is all going to come down to essentially how they play on one another, as Lawrence has to take a penalty. He's burnt a penalty from the final chicane, and we can see that he's down to P7, and Kraken is up into P6. So the order is changing with these pit stops. And what it means is ZenQ is going to go for the move, and he squeezes it on the inside versus Lawrence. But of course, Lawrence says, well, I'm going to have the inside for turn 2 then, ZenQ. What are you going to do about that? As the pole has to give up the position for the time being, and Lawrence is now back into P7, but for how long is ZenQ goes to the inside, but he's not able to get fully alongside at turn 3, but Lawrence goes wide, respecting the width of the car, and as they come out of 4 and 5, it looks like ZenQ is all over the back of the British driver, is the Polishman, as they make their way out towards turn 6, and he's trying to go to the inside prematurely for turn 6, and he's going to squeeze it so tight. Well, ZenQ, there wasn't space there, but you found it nonetheless. Well done to you, sir. As they all make their way through, Olaf still ahead of Philo, and Phil the Vibes 2 seconds down on these guys, as Mamba Strike right now is in a bit of a no man's land in P5, finding himself chasing after Yaya, who's 1.4 seconds up the road and 1.2 seconds ahead of having the Kraken time. And Kraken, of course, having cleared a lot of drivers now in that very quiet zone, and he just needs this. Kraken is the one who so desperately needs a good result after having such difficult races in both race 1 and race 2, does the Corvette driver, and we'll see what he's able to do as he makes his way up towards the end of Sector 3 and onto Sector 4, as ZQ has finally cleared Lawrence. But definitely it's worth noting that Lawrence is no man to back down from a fight. He has been fighting non-stop all evening. As we see, Luco has picked up another half-second penalty. He's got to be picking those up at turn 11. That's the only place I can imagine you'd pick up a half-second penalty like that so regularly for cutting the apex curve there. As we see, Crowhawk has indeed, folks, jumped NMK, but it's worth noting that Crowhawk did not change his tyres, and that is why he has got ahead of NMK as a result of that. Well, I think he hasn't changed his tyres, although I could be wrong about that. The tyre wear on these two drivers is identical. Yes, that is the case. So Crowhawk did not take those new tyres, and that's why he is 5.5 seconds ahead of BMK, so taking those tyres costs you an extra 5 seconds in the pits, so it's 15 seconds if you don't take tyres on in the pits that you lose. Meanwhile, we can see that coming into the pits right now is Luco, the Welshman, who at the time was battling for approximately P8, P9 versus XE, and also ZQ, but it looks as though it's opened up a bit, and now everything is starting to return to some semblance of normality in terms of the positions, as we see Slim Yeezus having gone for that very early pit stop, starting right at the back. He may as well gamble on it. He's moved up to P12 as Luco now comes out of the pit, so the Finn has gained one place through this early strategic gamble, but will he be able to hold on later in the race where that tyre wear starts to cripple him? But we will wait and find out as we say hello to Chronic Opal in the chat, who's popped in from Australia. Wonder what the time is over there, but the time right now is action time back at the Nürburgring GP circuit. Let's not lose track of what's going on here, as we can see that it has spaced out a little bit between our top 4 and 5 drivers here, as Mamba Strike is at the rear of our top 5 right now. But remember, with all the strategy that's going on Mamba Strike, Yaya, Phil the Vibes, Philo and Olaf have not pitted yet, it is all going to chop and change as we come into their pit stop windows. Now we are coming up to the halfway point of the race on the next lap, so that could determine some people going into the pits. As we look back from ZQ Meister's car right now, he's currently running his Aston Martin in P7 ahead of Lawrence. And you can see that Lawrence just does not have the legs coming out of the Schumacher S. We've said it time and time again, but it's just so blatantly obvious that we have to keep calling it out. But as soon as it comes to any heavy braking zones or zones where it's trail braking involved, you can see that Lawrence just simply starts to close up, and in the dirty air, he's not affected by it compared to the Aston Martin, which gets a bit more shaky in the dirty air by looks of things, and it means he's able to stay with the drivers. But again, once we get to these acceleration zones, that's where the Aston Martin opens it up, and then Lawrence has to close it back down under braking. But it's been a very good gamble by Lawrence in terms of running that Mercedes, and we look forward to seeing if he's able to make any more moves as we go later tonight. But as we look back towards our drivers up front right now, we can see that Philo has made a mistake somewhere or had to earn a penalty because he has dropped time to Olaf. That gap between him and Olaf has opened up by approximately 1.5 seconds, and Phil the Vibes is getting ever closer to the back of Philo. So could we see a potential podium from Vibes here, or an attempt at a podium? It's looking good, is it, for the British driver as he makes his way up towards turn 3, and as they charge in towards the apex for the 5th time of asking here, you can see that Vibes is in a very comfortable space. A little bit of snap oversteer on the exit there of 3, but it's not going to deter the Brit, is it? As we can see, that gap between himself and Philo is coming down. So Philo is under a little bit of pressure right now as they come into Sector 2. Behind them, Yaya not closing up to Phil the Vibes that rapidly. In fact, losing some time to Phil the Vibes, it should be pointed out. That gap opened up to 4 seconds almost, as Mamba Strike behind is closing up a little bit versus Yaya, albeit he won't be closed up if he keeps going wide of apex at turn 7 like that as they make their way down towards turn 8. Now Kraken, meanwhile, the C7 driver, the Corvette C7, the only Corvette here tonight. Really, again, just simply imagine this race in P6. Again, this is his place on circuit right now, but it's not his overall place. We suspect he's more down towards P8 once all the pit stops clean up, but he's doing a good job as the Brit right now and just keeping out of trouble. But look again behind him, ZQ versus Lawrence. This battle is going to continue, and the Mercedes driver once again finding that he can't make a move right now, but he's better than ZQ on the brakes into the corners where it matters, and that's where ZQ's got to be careful, because Lawrence will go for a move if he sees an opportunity. I think ZQ's met his match in terms of a driver who will go for moves and be quite aggressive with them as well. And now as we look further back down, we can see ZenQ's teammate XE in P9 right now with Crowhawk over the back of him. And this is not where Crowhawk will want to be. He will not want to be behind the driver who may defend against him. Because remember, XE has not pitted, albeit we can see here he's pulling to the outside into the chicane. And I think XE realises this. I think he's being fair to Crowhawk and saying, you know what, there's no point in me fighting you. I'm just going to destroy my own race because I haven't even pitted yet. Whereas you have, as XE comes in for his scheduled pit stop, as does ZenQ. So that is going to release some of our drivers here. And we haven't got anybody else pitting at the moment. But the order is now starting to open up a little bit as we see Slim Yeezus making his way up towards turn 16. Pardon me, ladies and gentlemen. And will Slim Yeezus be able to gain versus the two Polish drivers as they're both in the pits right now? I think he may gain one position, but whether he gains two is another question entirely as we ride with Ben MK from the third person perspective right now. And we can see that as they're coming up towards turn number one, it is ZenQ in a drag race with Slim Yeezus, but Yeezus has done it. You can see that Yeezus has just picked him into turn one, and it's working out for the Finnish driver as behind them, Luko in a similar spot has been able to get past XE. So that means the two Polish drivers calling it a little bit later on the pit stop. They've now got the work to do in terms of overtaking out on track. So it's not working out for the Poles right now, but it will come to them later in the race, of course, when that tyre wear starts to sink in for our drivers who pitted on laps 2, 3 and 4. But we'll have to keep an eye on that as we see it up front. Meanwhile, as we look to Philo, our P2 driver, the gap between himself and Olaf has opened up to 4 seconds. Vibes, meanwhile, has fallen off the back of Philo. That gap has opened up by 2.5 seconds over the course of the last lap and a half. So Vibes has probably made a mistake somewhere, or Philo's just decided to put the hammer down a little bit now, realising that the pit window is starting to close and it's getting closer. It's like essentially closing in on you. You know there's that opponent chasing after you, and it's Crowhawk in this case who's sat in P8 right now. Will he be able to get his way back up onto that podium and potentially in competition for P2? But Yaya in P4 having a quiet race as well, and I think just trying to keep himself within that window to chase after Feel the Vibes towards the end. As Mamba Strike 2 seconds down and Yaya in P5. Again, a silent one right now, and it has spaced out a bit. It should be pointed out, ladies and gentlemen, this race is not as exciting now that we've got into the midpoint of it in terms of overtakes out on track. But the reason for that is because of the strategy and how it's playing out right now. There's been a lot of changes on strategy here compared to what we're used to. A lot of drivers gambling to go early and a good number of drivers gambling to go at the mid and the late points of the race. So it is really spaced out on the pit stops, and it is a long lap as well. So that's why it's just quieting down a little bit, but it will concertina together, I assure you that. As we see Ben MK coming across the line right now to complete lap 6 and move on to lap number 7. His previous lap being a 1:56.9. A good lap from the British driver there, albeit the gap between himself and the race leader, 28.8 seconds. I think Olaf has cleared Ben MK completely, but the drivers who will be at vulnerability to him will be the likes of, say, Feel the Vibes and Yaya right now, who are just in that window to pip him into turn 1 if they pit immediately with that 20-second time loss for a tyre change. But of course, if they don't take those tyres, it's a 15-second loss, and that will be preying on their minds right now. As Crowhawk, meanwhile, 20 seconds off our race leader, so this man could be in contention for the win. But of course, given the fact that Olaf is leading by such a dominant margin right now, Crowhawk will need to try and get that gap down to 15 seconds because Olaf will feel very comfortable knowing that if he pits on lap number 9, then as a result, he doesn't need to take the new tyres and he can simply lift and coast the car to victory. But it will be on their minds as they're making their way in towards the final third of the race now, and it's not closing too much up around track, although I say that, I think we do have Slim Yeezus picking up a half-second penalty for track limits, probably in the arena section, the Mercedes arena, because that half-second penalty is recent. And we can see ZenQ is getting closer and closer to the back of the Finnish driver here. And meanwhile, in P12, Luko, the Mercedes driver, who is ahead of XE right now, who is our last runner at this point in time. And I don't think XE is closing up too rapidly versus the Mercedes driver in his Aston Martin machinery. But as our drivers all come to the end of lap 7, or start to come to the end of lap, are we going to see any more pit stops from our race leaders in particular, i.e. our top 5 have yet to pit? And indeed, I don't think Lawrence has pitted yet either, or has Kraken. So the first driver who has pitted effectively is Crowhawk, the first of our drivers who have pitted earlier on, albeit he wasn't the first to pit, is the Croatian. And Mamba Strike is into the pit from P6, as is Lawrence, in fact. So those two drivers have pitted, and Kraken as well. So Crowhawk has been released now, and he's got to try and close it down. He's got to try and get that gap down as much as possible to the race leaders. He wants to get it down to 15 seconds or less. He's got to keep hammering in these laps, but I think he is starting to hit the cliff of those tyres as we ride with his telemetry active, and we can see that those tyres, particularly though front left and front, we'll say that front left and rear left tyre, they're both starting to feel a little bit of graining, and that might be costing him just some time. And if we look to Olaf, for example, meanwhile, very similar tyre wear, albeit he's got a lot less tyre wear on his rear tyres by comparison, particularly that rear right has barely been touched. I think you could put that on a fresh car and say that it was a fresh tyre. And as we see Olaf coming down towards turn 8 for the 8th time of asking, we can see 5.4 seconds is his advantage over Philo, and I think Philo will have to accept here that he's not going to be closing Olaf down at this point unless Olaf makes a major error. But that's where it's all going to play out right now as we look back, and we can see that with Kraken and, well, in terms of the order and how it's flicked out, well, Mamba Strike, I don't think took on a fresh... Well, he did take on a fresh set of tyres, so what has happened here? Because Kraken is up into P8 and Lawrence is all the way down in P9, whereas Lawrence came into the pits ahead of these guys, if I remember correctly. So that is a bit of a shock to the senses there. But Lawrence is down to P9 after his pit stop, and whilst he's doing okay for it, as Kraken... Alright, Kraken is the one who's broken the trend, so he did not take the fresh tyres, and I think that Lawrence might have made a mistake or something with regards to his pit stop, or just simply made a mistake coming out of the pits, because Kraken is up there, and Lawrence now has to try and find his way past the C7 driver with 2 laps to go at the end of this lap. And we'll wait and see what's happening, but Lawrence is getting closer to the back of that C7, so you can imagine that the British driver is going to have a go at his fellow countrymen in due time. As we look back towards our leaders, there's still no pit stops for any of our leaders right now. Our top 4 are not pitting, and we can see that Yaya right now is starting to become more and more vulnerable to Crowhawk and Ben MK. And to give you an idea, the gap between Ben MK and Yaya right now is 18 seconds. So Yaya would have to pit and not take on tyres to make sure he stays ahead of Ben, and Ben, I think, is starting to feel the cliff of those tyres. Those front tyres in particular are getting more heavily worn, and I think Yaya just needs to simply keep it together and not do anything silly to beat his teammate. Of course, they won't want to take one another out, but they can't afford to fight each other either. As we look back and see that Crowhawk, making his way through turn 2 right now, is really trying to bear down. He's just not able to get that gap down anymore. His tyres are falling off the cliff a little bit, and that gap is now stabilised at 20.5 seconds between himself and Olaf. So I don't think he's on for the win here, but I think he could be on for a P3 if he's able to sustain this pace just a little bit longer, because we are coming up to the final lap for pit stops. As we see in the rear of your camera shot, they're going into the arena, and coming into turn 3, it's Lawrence on the inside of Kraken, and Kraken is on the outside, but will he get the cut back into 4? And he's going to go for the cutback, and Lawrence has to go wide. He has to give him the space, but he's got to be careful there, because by going that wide, I think he's going to gain the time, and I think he might be subject to a half-second penalty. Lawrence wasn't able to pick up the half-second penalty that time. He just kept it within the limits. Good on him, but Kraken now will be looking for a way back past. A good move by Lawrence, a good string of moves in the Mercedes arena, but he's got to be so careful not to run too wide out of 4 and 5, as we can see that Kraken is going to go to the inside in the drag race down towards the braking zone for 8, and that Corvette very heavy on its brakes, and you can see the understeer that Kraken experienced initially as his Carmen dislighted up, and Lawrence now really under a lot of pressure from ZenQ behind, as we see riding on board and looking back from Kraken. He is trying to get ZenQ into the mix here to give him the breathing room versus Lawrence, and ZenQ is going to go for the move as Olaf pits from the lead, and ZenQ goes to the outside for turn 11, and well, I don't think he's going to get it done, although I say that. I think he's going to try and plant it on the inside for 12, but is he going to have the opportunity to do so? No, he backs out of it. He's not going to be able to do it, as our top 4 drivers all pit then. So we will keep an eye on where this brings them all out in relation to one another. And to give you an idea right now, where it looks as though Crowhawk is coming in towards the start-finish straight. So I think Crowhawk here will be coming out somewhere near our leaders. Olaf is out the pits, and he's going to have the clearance. But what about Crowhawk versus Feel the Vibes? Well, Crowhawk is up into P2. The strategy has paid off, and he's cleared all the field up to P2. I don't think Olaf went for a tyre change, but everybody else has. And that means Olaf right now has just got to hold on for one more lap, and Crowhawk's tyres are almost at the end of their life, but Philo has just managed to get ahead of Feel the Vibes with it all happening right now, and I think Philo and Vibes both went for the, well, Vibes didn't go for the tyres early on, and that's why Vibes is struggling a little bit, but Philo's just come out ahead of Feel the Vibes, and that's how it's all playing out, because Vibes was further back, and Vibes didn't go for the tyre change. He tried to jump Philo in the pits there, and Yaya in P5 just ahead of his team out. Now he's got to make a decision, of course. Will he let Ben through, or will they fight it to the bitter end? I think they're going to fight it to the bitter end. Neither one of them wants to come second in the battle with the teammates here, as they make their way down towards turn 8. But meanwhile, further up towards turn 8, what you can see is Philo is being pressured by Feel the Vibes, although that gap has opened up a little bit. And in that battle for P7, Mamba Strike is clear, but in the battle for P5, Yaya and Ben, well, Ben is all over the back of his teammate, and I think he's going to have to go for a move at the chicane if he's going to go for it anywhere. As we look back to the battle for P8, and Lawrence has cleared Kraken, and Kraken has been caught on the inside into turn 8 by ZenQ. What a move by ZenQ, going late on the brakes, and I think that caught Kraken by surprise and cut his momentum before he could go for the cutback. And as they make their way up the hill now, Slim Jesus is trying to catch up to the pair of them, but I don't think there's enough time to do it for the Finnish driver, as they're all coming up towards the end of Sector 3 and be starting Sector 4 very shortly. But meanwhile, coming out of the chicane, he's led this race from start to finish. He had a clean run from the very start, whereas other drivers haven't. It is Olaf who is going to be your winner of race number 3. Finally, for the third time asking, he's done it. A race win for Olaf tonight, ahead of Crowhawk. The Croatian will be proud with his P2, and then Philo coming third on the podium once again in what was a difficult race for the Brit, ahead of Phil the Vibes, who will be pleased with that P4, and then Yaya and Bennis a drag race to the line, and who's going to come away with P5? It's Yaya by literally 0.04 of a second, and behind them Mamba Strike in P7 ahead of Lawrence in P8, who's just going to hold on ahead of Senku, I think, and it'll be Kraken Time in P10, and then it will be Jesus in P11, Luca in P12, and Exie in P13 to complete tonight's race proceedings. Goodness me, ladies and gentlemen. Well, you could have had it any closer towards the end there between our drivers, but there we have it. The results for race number 3 of EU Division 1, subject to any stewards' inquiries, of course. Olaf picking up the race win at the third attempt, ahead of Crowhawk and TNR Philo, who rounded off our podium. Phil the Vibes finishing P4, a result he'll be very pleased with, and Yaya rounding off our top 5. Ben MK couldn't quite pip his teammate to P5 this time, but Ben's showing a very good form tonight, and he'll be carrying that momentum into the races in round 2 next week. And the fastest lap in race number 3 being a 1:55.148 as set by Philo on lap number 3. As we say hello to Lerb, to Martin Brower, and also to Fen in the chat as well. And we've only got time for one more thing now, ladies and gentlemen, before we call it a night. And that, of course, is King of the Karts. The one race that we've all been waiting for, as I smashed my keyboard on my steering wheel there by accident. Although, hopefully, you probably didn't hear that on the microphone boom. And I hope we're not doing 10 laps in the King of the Karts race. There we go, that's better. I was going to say, I'm not doing 10 laps at Nürburgring. Not unless you ask me to, first and foremost. Oh yeah, I've got to extend all those gears. Oh, it's too late. I'll do it another day. Doesn't matter now. Uh-oh, that's not good. Get the keyboard quickly. Oh no, that's not good. I need to quickly get into spectator camera and find somebody out on circuit. There we go, that's better. Because I don't want to be doing the entire race in reverse. Oh, but what cracking racing tonight. It really has been. And well, I think race 3 for me was the race of the evening because of the opening lap. That was a phenomenal action, particularly from Ben, to try and go for that P2 so early on. He saw the opportunity and he went for it. But my driver of the day today, I know I've talked about him a lot, but I've got to give him credit where it's due, folks, has to be Lawrence. In that Mercedes, to be competing versus the Aston Martins and really competing for the majority of the races, as somebody spins out there, competing for what was P5, P6, and just not having the legs to completely wrap up the package. It deserves a huge mention because going for that car, something very different by comparison with what a lot of drivers are bringing to the table tonight. And I think that's going to do Lawrence well later on in the season. And again, folks, I've said it before at the start of the stream, but be sure to let me know either tonight in the chat or alternatively later on in the Discord if you're part of the GTRL Discord, or drop me a private message to let me know if the stream quality was okay. We are streaming at 1080p, 30 frames per second. I've heard good feedback so far. We've upped the quality as much as we can. We can't get to that 60 frames per second, unfortunately. We don't have the bandwidth to do it. But we're to try and bring you things a little bit more quality compared to what you're used to. And well, hopefully it's worked out as we see their Slim users go for a spin and always taking us with them. And we're going to get underway then with King of the Karts. Here we go, 2 laps. Who's going to be the winner by the end of it? Definitely won't be me. Boop. It's glad to hear everybody's enjoyed it tonight, folks, in terms of the races. But here's the important one. Okay, right, we've been asked to try and get a podium. Oh, Olaf and XE having a little bit of a tussle there. Nice and early on. Got to be careful of those raised curbs in this vehicle because the ride height's too low for them. Oh no, I'm in a sandwich. I've got guys on all sides. This isn't good. No! No, 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 no! Well, I'll be honest with you folks, I've never had 4 go-karts at once. Cue the Pornhub thing. Let's try and get back into this race now. I'm assuming we can go flat out through the Schumacher S. Something's gone wrong for Yaya because he's lost a lot of momentum. There's carnage, there's a kart flying all over the circuit. Number of drivers being reset actually. That's something to watch out for. You could be forced into a reset there. Woo, that was a dodge. It's carnage. Come on, Yaya, let's work together. Let's catch up to the leaders. I'll give you the space on the inside. Oh, somebody's knocked us for 6 there a little bit. Hello, Martin. Let's give Yaya a little punt. Give him a boost. God, these karts are so slippery when they make contact with one another. Oh, Olaf went for the takeout on Martin. We're not going to get the podium, folks. I'm too sensitive on the brakes at the chicane. We'll learn that for tomorrow night. I'll take a P6 though. Well, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That is King of the Karts complete. And tomorrow's goal will be P3 for King of the Karts. But until then, thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to come back at the same time tomorrow night. That is 7:30 in the evening, British Summer Time, or UTC +1 for EU Division 2, where we take a look at our middle league drivers. Remember, we've got 3 EU divisions in Season 38, but we're coming back tomorrow with EU Division 2 to see how the midfield guys get on at the Nürburgring GP circuit. I'll be your host once again, but until then, I wish you all a lovely evening. Stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.